My great kingdom of Italy. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76 Set sail. Whoosh whoosh, squeak, 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 squeak. The train arrived at the terminal station, Genoa, and the passengers stood up to get off point in the last carriage. Liu Buchan rubbed his swollen waist, stood up and said to a guard beside him, "Jiang Liu, let everyone get up, we are here." Then, Jiang Liu, who was also confused, woke up everyone in the carriage one by one. "Jiang Liu, why did you kick me? Hey, you are amazing." With a burst of noise, everyone in the carriage got up. It's pitiful to say that they were different from the passengers in other carriages. In order to avoid being discovered by the French, they not only stayed in the carriage the whole time, but also changed the hooks of several locomotives in succession, and even hooked up to a freight train transporting poultry. It was hard enough along the waypoint. After everyone got up, Liu Buchan looked at the officers and soldiers who were originally preparing to accept the tranquilization of the second ship with him. "Okay, everyone, stay calm. I'm not familiar with this country in Italy, so we are all waiting in the carriage." Liu Buchan's words made everyone in the carriage quiet, except for the sound of individuals packing their luggage. No one dared to speak. The purpose of this time was already mentioned in the car. The Imperial Court purchased 2 large Italian warships. They will learn from the Italian Navy officers and soldiers on the warship and strive to be able to operate it proficiently as soon as possible. They didn't have to wait long. After all the other passengers left, a man wearing an Italian Navy uniform walked out of the carriage. "Everyone, you, now, please follow me out." This sentence was said in Chinese. Although it was spoken awkwardly, the officers and soldiers of the Biang Navy in the carriage could understand it. The Biang officers and soldiers in the carriage followed the Italian naval officer and passed through a guarded door and saw nearly 10 carriages. "Everyone, we need to take a carriage next. I personally suggest that you don't open the curtains to avoid being discovered." This time, the words spoken were in English. Fortunately, many of the officers and soldiers of the Biang Navy knew English. After telling each other, everyone boarded the carriage. After they all got on, the carriage started slowly, taking them to take advantage of the sunset and move in one direction. As the leader, Liu Buchan naturally stayed in the same carriage with the Italian naval officer. "Captain, do you know your name?" After staying in the UK for a long time, Liu Buchan's English proficiency is not low. "Hello, my name is Gomez, Radilus Gomez." "Hello, Captain Gomes. Wonder where we are going next." Now that Liu Buchan knew the name, the next step was naturally where he was most concerned about. "We will go directly to the naval base in Genoa. Because we are pressed for time, we cannot give you time to rest." "It doesn't matter. This is exactly what we want." By the time Liu Buchan and his party arrived at the naval base, it was already dark, and the gas lamps in the city were lighting up everywhere. When they were turned on, they looked as beautiful as stars in the sky. After the carriage was stable, the group of people got out of the carriage. The military port at night was heavily guarded, and patrolling soldiers were everywhere. Liu Buchan and his party, led by Captain Gomes, came to a dormitory building. "The second floor, here is where you will rest. The bedding is ready. I will have people deliver food later. I'm sorry that I can only let you eat here." "You're welcome, Captain Gomes. We are all soldiers and we don't care about comfort." After sending the Italian officer away, Liu Buchan gave the order, "Work in groups of 4, and each group chooses a room." He had seen it before. It was a room for 4 people, and the bedding was all new. Sure enough, a pile of bread and a pot of soup were delivered later, and a group of people sat beside the bed, eating soup and bread. After eating and drinking enough, I felt a little sleepy, and fell asleep under the quilt. The next day, the group was woken up by the wake-up call in the base point, and then Captain Gomes came again. "Everyone, we are going to board the ship next, so please hurry up." As soon as they heard that they were about to board the ship, the group immediately became energetic. "This is a 7,000-ton warship. Who doesn't want to see it? While they were busy, there was also a group of people in the naval base pointing at the two warships, looking at these two warships for the last time. They will no longer belong to our navy from now on. Admiral Garlock, the Minister of the Navy, looked at the Venice and Brescia docked in front of him and said with emotion, "Your Excellency, Admiral, please rest assured that, although these two warships no longer belong to the Navy, we will still not lose their reputation. In the future, we will make the French in the Far East feel scared when they hear these two warships." Ha ha ha. Very ambitious. Hearing Captain Leifer's impassioned speech beside him, the Admiralty recalled his youth. "I won't say anything unnecessary. You also know this time that, although the King Navy is nominally in command, you are actually in charge. I have only one request. No matter what happens, you must return to Italy safely. I carefully selected them from the Navy, and I will never allow you to be buried in the Far East. Please rest assured, General, the shells that can hit me have not yet been manufactured." Gorek patted the captain on the shoulder and continued to ask, "What about the King Navy officers and soldiers who have arrived?" "There is no difference at all, but they are a little taciturn. Gomes is responsible for receiving them." The Navy Minister nodded and said with a serious expression, "In that case, you can set off early tomorrow morning." "Didn't you say 3 days later?" "That's originally the case, but I heard that the French seemed to have caught wind of it. To be on the safe side, you need to leave early." "Okay, I'll have the crew prepare in advance. In addition, after you pass through the Suez Canal, the names of the Venetian and Brescia will no longer be available. The King dynasty has named them Zeon and Jingion. You will become the first captain of the Zeon, Admiral." Gorek left after looking at the two warships for a while. After all, these two warships belonged to the King dynasty, and Italy needed to continue building them. After Admiral Gorek left, Leifer immediately found Gomes and informed him of the decision to set off early. Then the next arrangement for buying officers and soldiers to familiarize themselves with the warships was cancelled. All officers and soldiers of the two warships, regardless of nationality, immediately began to transport supplies and burn coal to the warships after a busy day. The exhausted officers and soldiers of the two countries burst out laughing when they saw that the other party was as dirty as themselves, which immediately brought the relationship between the two parties closer. Seeing this opportunity, Leifer and Gomez brought wine and sausages in the evening. A group of old men grilled sausages and drank wine. The relationship between the two became more harmonious. Even Liu Buchan hugged the two captains. Chat together in English. The next day, there were no flowers to send off. The two Venice-class patrol ships went to sea again in the name of training, but this time the two ships probably would not come back again. I feel like this chapter didn't have the desired effect, so you'll just have to read it. 2 chapters. You must leave a recommendation vote. Chapter 77 News. In the Andaman Sea, 2 warships are sailing at high speed. These were the Zeon and Jingion that had just been replenished from Yangon. However, the atmosphere on the ship was very depressing because they got the news from the British in Yangon. Just 5 days ago, the French fleet raided Moree port. The division was almost completely wiped out. Not only that, the Moree shipyard was also bombarded by the French fleet, causing heavy losses. Of course, Carlo is also responsible for letting the French fleet speed up its attack on the Fujian Navy in Moree. The news that Italy sold 2 Venice-class patrol ships to the King dynasty was known to the French. In addition to protesting to Italy immediately, they also sent a telegram to the isolated French Far East fleet to immediately prepare to intercept. After some consideration, Guba decided to immediately eliminate the Fujian Navy, leaving the 2 patrol ships from afar alone. With the help of Fujian officials. At this time, Fujian officials blocked information from the Navy's officers and soldiers, and were not allowed to act rashly by calling for combat. The Fujian Navy was completely undefended, and was beaten to pieces with the destruction of the Fujian Navy. Zeon and the commanders on the Jingion had a heated discussion. First, they need to consider where to enter the South China Sea. There are currently 2 options for entering the South China Sea. The most recent is to take the Strait of Malacca and go directly through it. Another option is to go around the Sunda Strait and enter the South China Sea. Both have their own advantages. Malacca can allow 2 warships, To enter the South China Sea at the fastest speed, while going through the Sunda Strait will take more time. Point of course, if you go through the Strait of Malacca, you may get stuck in the strait. Going through the Sunda Strait takes more time, and is also likely to be blocked. Faced with these two choices, the three commanders had a heated discussion. Among them, Liu Buchan, as the nominal fleet commander, supported taking the Sunda Strait. The reason why he supported taking the Sunda Strait was simple: for stability. After the Fujian Navy was annihilated, he wanted to bring the fleet back home safely. As for the two captains, they support taking the Strait of Malacca. In the words of Captain Leifer, even if the French Far East Fleet blocks them in the Strait of Malacca, they will not be able to block them with the firepower, protection and speed of the two patrol ships. Livable. The main thing that gives them confidence is the strength of the French fleet. The ships of the French Far East Fleet, currently commanded by Solitaire, are basically at a speed of 13 to 15 knots, and even the 5 armored ships in its fleet are 5,000-6,000 tons of cargo, with a speed of up to 18.6 knots. The two Venetian class ships were simply not something they could catch up with, and the powerful firepower of their own ships naturally gave the two bold Italian captains the idea of trying. So on this route issue, no one of the three could convince the other. Just as they were in a stalemate, a visitor unexpectedly broke in and broke the deadlock. On the watchtower, the sailors responsible for the reconnaissance shouted loudly. Two ships were spotted ahead. Upon hearing the sighting of the ship, the three commanders immediately stopped arguing. At this time, as the captain of the Zealand, Captain Leifer immediately issued the order: lay down the traffic boat and ask Captain Gomes to return to the Jinggian, because they are close to Southeast Asia. They must remain alert. Captain Gomes also understood this and immediately boarded the transport boat. The traffic boat was then lowered and rowed towards the Jinggian under its command. After the Jinggian sent a signal that Captain Gomes had boarded the ship, the two warships immediately sailed towards the discovered ship. The Baron Yoko is a new cargo ship of more than 4,000 tons. Since its launch in 1879, it has been running sea transportation from Sagan to Colombo. This ship and its crew have rich sailing experience. This time, the Baron Yoko was ordered by the colonial government of Indochina to receive a batch of coal from Colombo and transport it to the fleet, commanded by His Excellency General Gooper. Along with it was the freighter Hick, which was also a new model of more than 2,000 tons freighter. When the two Venetian class ships discovered them, the two French merchant ships also discovered them. However, the discovery of two warships did not attract their attention, because France was not at war with other countries. Sorry, you said it was at war with the Qing dynasty. Does this count? I didn't see that these two warships were at least more than 5,000 tons. It was impossible for the Qing people to have such large warships. Moreover, those warships of the Qing country could only travel in coastal waters, and they were all destroyed by General Goober, so these two cargo ships were very important to them. The warships that appeared did not pay attention. But then, the actions of the two battleships became confusing. They saw two warships approaching them quickly. After getting close to a certain distance, the sailor responsible for the observation showed an expression as if he had seen a ghost. The battleship of the Qing people, I saw two warships quickly hoisting a yellow dragon flag. Although the sailors of the two cargo ships had never seen the Qing Navy, they had seen a lot of yellow dragon flags. They were all symbols of the Qing dynasty. The flags raised by the two warships were definitely not for good looks. They saw two warships approaching them at high speed, which frightened the crew on the cargo ship. Boom, boom, two shells hit the front and back of the cargo ship, making them afraid to move. This is not the age of discovery. Merchant ships can carry enough artillery for self-defense. The pirates that have been rampant for centuries have long disappeared. The development of modernization has long left no room for pirates to survive. Maybe it still exists in some unknown corner, but the major traffic arteries have been cleaned up. But now, facing the threat of large-scale patrols, the two cargo ships have no better way besides surrendering. You can't run, and it's impossible to fight. If you don't surrender, are you waiting to feed the sharks? After the two cargo ships were forced to stop, several traffic boats were drawn from the warships, full of sailors holding weapons. After boarding the cargo ship and taking control of the driving and power rooms, two officers who stood out from the crowd boarded the ship. The captain, the Boarding officer asked the captain of his cargo ship as soon as he opened his mouth. After the identification of the captured sailors, the captains of the two cargo ships were brought out point at the same time. The cargo on the ship made the officers who boarded the ship feel the difference in intercepting the ship this time. Tell me, why are you transporting white coal? After learning for the first time that the ship was transporting white coal, the officer leading the team became serious. You must know that white coal cannot be used on ordinary ships. It can generally only be used on warships or fast cargo ships transporting valuables. Combined with the thousands of tons of white coal on board, the goal is very clear. We are civilian ships. We only know the purpose of transportation, but we don't know the use at all. The captain who was questioned wanted to defend himself, but the officer leading the team did not give him a chance. Since you don't want to say it, then throw it down and feed it to the sharks. After the officer's words, the sailors immediately escorted him to the side of the ship. Seeing the sea in front of him, his own life was more important after all. I said, tell me, who should I give it to? The captain was questioned again, and this time he was honest. We transported it to Sagan. I heard it was to replenish coal for the fleet. The captain's words shocked the leading officer. This news was too important to them. Immediately the news was passed to the warship, and such important news was obtained from the captured captain. Then their next choice will be easy. Since the fleet under Commander Gooper still needs to replenish coal, this means that it is either not in Malacca or is still on its way here. Then the three of them decided to leave for Malacca, which should be relatively safe now. Now that the decision has been made, the fate of these two cargo ships has been decided. After replenishing some coal, the crew on the cargo ship will be rushed into the lifeboat, and then the sea valve will be opened. These two cargo ships are preparing to supply the French fleet. Was sunk to the bottom of the sea like this. Since this is a navigation channel, there are many passing ships, so cargo ship crews do not have to worry about their safety at all. Then the two Venice-class cruise ships immediately started running at full power and rushed directly to the Strait of Malacca. They needed to pass through before the arrival of the French fleet. Sorry, I have something busy today, so I can only update one chapter. Chapter 78 Storm in the South China Sea. 1. Xiangshan County is adjacent to Mac or occupied by Portugal, so it is not easy to be the magistrate of Xiangshan County. Although it seems to be much better than Bayonne County across the sea, jobs that are easily involved in westernization are always not so attractive. Therefore, Bayou Open, the 269th Jinshi of the 3rd class of Enk in the 9th year of Tangxi, was appointed as the magistrate of Xiangshan County. Although Xiangshan County involves westernization, after all, the Portuguese are not strong enough. So it is not difficult for him to be the county magistrate. The most important thing in life is to be content. Compared with Bayonne County next door, Bayou Open, the county magistrate, is much better. Recently, the French raided Maui. The Fujian Navy, which had worked hard over the years, suffered heavy losses. The achievements of many years of shipping management were ruined. When I heard about Shen Baosan, Mr. Shen was so angry that he couldn't sleep. The Governor General immediately ordered the coastal states and counties to immediately organize civilians to patrol the coastline and be on guard against the appearance of the French fleet. This errand has kept Magistrate Bayou busy for a while, and his calves have grown big. After the arrangements are finally made, Magistrate Bayou can finally take a rest. However, Magistrate Bayou was destined to work hard and could not rest. A government official ran in panting and shouted, "Sir, it's not good, my lord, I'm very fine. Why are you in such a panic?" Magistrate Bayou, who was disturbed, immediately came out and warned the official, "No, my lord, 2 large warships have arrived from the sea." What? Upon hearing the news, County Magistrate Bayou immediately stepped forward and grabbed the Yaman servant's shoulders. After the approaching warship, did you see clearly that there were other ships? The officer who was grabbed by the shoulders looked troubled. I don't know about this. As soon as we saw 2 large warships, Liu Tao immediately asked me to come back and report to your lord. Unable to get any more information from the Yaman, Magistrate Bayou immediately ordered, "Prepare the sedan immediately, and I will go check it out personally." In addition, I will immediately summon the people and prepare to find out what happened with me. It can be seen that Magistrate Bayo is also a responsible person and does not mess up like others. However, subsequent news relieved Magistrate Bayo's worries. The sedan has not yet left the city gate, but Liu Bantao is riding over on a fast horse. What happened? Seeing Bantao Liu coming over, County Magistrate Bayo immediately stopped him. Misunderstanding. This is a misunderstanding. Tired and out of breath, Bantao Liu took a breath before continuing. This is our big warship. I was anxious before and asked Jara to come and report back. It turned out to be a misunderstanding. Upon hearing that it was a misunderstanding, Magistrate Bayo felt relieved, but he still had to inquire carefully. Tell me carefully, Master. Later, through Liu Bantao's words, Magistrate Bayo finally clarified the whole story. It turns out that early this morning, Team Leader Liu led his people to patrol the coastline as usual, but this time, when he patrolled Jayajia village, he heard panicked villagers reporting that 2 large warships appeared on the sea in Jayajia village, and there were also people from Jayajia village. Several small boats were put down from the soldier ship, and blonde-haired and blue-eyed foreigners could be seen on them. Upon discovering the presence of a foreign warship, the village elders immediately thought of the notice in the county. This might be some kind of foreign prisoner called France. So he sent people to the county to report it and organize the transfer of the villagers. After hearing the report from Jayajia village, Bantao Liu felt that the matter was of great importance and immediately asked Jara to report. In addition, he took people to see the truth. As a result, when we arrived at Jayajia village, we saw foreigners, but beside the foreigners there were people wearing official uniforms. Such a strange combination made Team Leader Liu feel strange. He sent 2 bold men to get closer and found out. It turned out that these 2 large warships belonged to the Imperial Court, and those foreign devils were also invited by the Imperial Court to fight. Foreign devils fought foreign devils, which made Liu Bantao feel that his head was not full, but he also knew that it was not his place to have anything to do with this matter. Immediately mount the news horse and rush over to report point. After listening to Liu Bantao's words, County Magistrate Bayo immediately issued 2 instructions. Stop calling the people together. Hurry up and buy a batch of pigs, sheep, melons and fruits. Once they're ready, send them to Jayajia village. Hurry. Then, Magistrate Bayo, led by Liu Banfa, immediately rushed to Jayajia village. I didn't know that Mr. Liu was coming, and I missed you from afar. I hope you will forgive me. As soon as Magistrate Bayo arrived in Jayajia village, he rushed to Liu Bukhan and spoke politely. Magistrate, Jaya doesn't have to be like this. I made a hasty decision to disturb your county. Although Liu Bukhan was just a guerrilla, when he rushed to Italy, Li Zongtang specially gave him a Taoist title in order to make him qualified to command the fleet, so he could also become the 6th rank magistrate of Bayo County. An adult title for the county magistrate. Where can I be received by Mr. Liu? I will be very happy. In addition, I will prepare a small amount of wine. I hope that you and a few other gentlemen will let me show my respect to the landlord. Magistrate Bayo didn't know the identities of Lifa and Gomez, but he saw the 2 chatting happily with Liu Bukhan, so he called them adults together. Anyway, it is customary for foreigners to be promoted to a senior official, and Bayo Yaopin's experience is no different. No need. Faced with Magistrate Bayo's banquet, Liu Bukhan directly refused, and of course he also gave reason. The Taiwan maker may be coming soon, and we understand Magistrate Bayo's kindness. When he heard that the governor of Guangdong and Guangxi was coming, Bayo Yaopin certainly wouldn't be angry. Instead, he felt that his previous decision was correct. Mr. Liu, you're welcome. Since Master Tay is coming, I'll let someone prepare for it. Then, Magistrate Bayo immediately ordered his servants to send people to call the best cook in Xiangshan and buy another batch of food. As for greeting Mr. Dute, there is no need. Who doesn't know that Zheng Guoquan and Zheng Dute disliked complicated etiquette the most? so just let him see that he is already preparing. About an hour later, Master Tai's guard of honor appeared in front of everyone. As expected, this Zheng Zitai was different from the others. He actually came on horseback. As soon as he arrived in front of them, Zheng Dute immediately smiled and said to Liu Bukhan, who came up to him, "You Liu Zixiang, you actually asked me to rush from Guangzhou to Xiangshan to welcome you. You are guilty." Upon hearing Zheng Dute's words, Liu Bukhan immediately knelt down and explained, "Please forgive me, Mr. Tate. I have no choice but to do this." Their fleet had no choice but to stop at Xiangshan. Their ship could not go to Guangzhou, and in order to prevent being caught in the trap by the French fleet, they could not go to Guangzhou at all. Considering safety and convenient communication, they rushed to Xiangshan. "Okay, I'm just joking with you, Zixiang. I think it's a great achievement that you traveled thousands of miles to command the Zijing second ship back home. How can I blame you? Don't tell me that you asked me to come to Xiangshan to welcome you. I just came to Fangcheng." No comments. Zheng Guoquan's words moved Liu Bukhan for a while. Then he remembered the two Italian captains who were accompanying him and immediately introduced them to Zheng Dute after standing up. "Master Taipei, these two are Captains Lifa and Gomes from Italy. They are currently commanding the second ship Zijing. Thank you to the two people who traveled thousands of miles to help me. Daking will not let down our friends who help us." Since Zheng Guoquan did not speak a foreign language, Liu Bukhan acted as a translator, making communication between the two easy. "Your Excellency, Governor Zheng is too polite. We are just doing our part." Although communication can be achieved in this way, neither party is very satisfied, but it is more or less okay. At this time, Magistrate Bao appeared at the right time. "My lords, my superiors have prepared a banquet. Would you please come to the table first and talk while eating?" This just relaxed the atmosphere, and Zheng Guoquan, who was from Guangdong and Guangxi, spoke immediately. "Since the master has invited us, let's be guests for once." Then the group of people went to the banquet and sat down. After drinking for 3 times, Zheng Zitai finally spoke. "Zixiang, what are your plans next?" Yes, this was Zheng Guoquan's goal. He was interested in these 2 large warships. Although he knew that this was Li Shaoquan's pet peeve, but now that the Fujian navy was in ruins, as long as they were pulled out of the plate, they would be the food. That's why he hurriedly left other official duties and rushed from Guangzhou to Xiangshan. It was not to hope that the 2 ships could continue to stay in the South China Sea and prevent the lonely fleet from wreaking havoc in the southeast and affecting the people's hearts otherwise. Just Liu Bukhan would not be worthy of him, a stage maker, rushing to meet him. No matter how you say it, the Taiwanese producers are all big people, and they don't have much free time to deal with everything. Facing Zheng Zitai's inquiry, Liu Bukhan looked embarrassed because the issue had not been discussed yet. Because according to his original intention, that is to arrive at Jinmen quickly and return to Lizangtang. Unfortunately, the 2 Italian captains wanted to stay in the South China Sea, disrupt French shipping, and seize the opportunity to attack lone French military and civilian ships. Although Liu Bukhan issued the order forcefully, the people in charge of the operation on the ship were all Italian officers and soldiers, and he was not easy to use force, so there was no result discussed along the way. And now Zheng Zitai's question was like pinching him by 7 inches, leaving him unsure of what to say. But although Liu Bukhan didn't speak, someone wanted to talk. "Liu, what is your excellency?" the governor asking. As the captain of the Xian, Lifa was also born in a noble family, so he was very good at observing people's emotions. At this time, he asked about him. In the face of Lifa's inquiry, although Liu Bukhan could conceal it, as long as this situation was exposed, he was destined to be in trouble. Even Li Zongtang would not protect him for this, so he could only tell the truth. When the 2 Italian captains heard Liu Bukhan translate Zheng Guoquan's words, their eyes lit up. "Please tell Governor Zheng that we are very willing to lead 2 warships to continue to attack France's maritime power." As a result, this banquet where the host and guest enjoyed themselves was extremely successful. Only Liu Buchan was in a complicated mood. However, this matter is no longer under his control, so he can only take it one step at a time. Fortunately, their ship was well maintained in Calcutta, so they don't have to worry about maintenance now, otherwise they would have to go to Japan. Since everyone said that chapter 68 is extremely poisonous, then Mantou Russian has changed. Chapter 79 Storm in the South China Sea. 2. Saigon is the stronghold of French power in Vietnam. France's influence there was deeply rooted before 1859. Later, La Grandia built the Norodom Palace, which became the administrative center of France in Vietnam. But today, Governor de Villiers, who stayed at Norodom Palace, was very dissatisfied because he received news that 2 patrol ships purchased by the king people from Italy had appeared at the Pearl River estuary. This made de Villiers very worried about the use of these 2 warships. The main reason was that these 2 warships were too fast, with up to 18 at a speed of more than 1 knot. Those 13 to 15 knot warships commanded by General Goubeau feel ashamed. Of course, what is even more hateful is the Italians. These young men who unified the country with the help of France dare to interfere in French affairs. They are simply desperate. Of course, this matter in Italy is not under his control. I believe the French government will make Italy regret selling 2 warships to the King dynasty. But now he must let General Goubeau deal with this threat. Your Excellency, General Goubeau, I believe you have also seen that the King people bought 2 large armored cruisers from Italy. I heard that even the officers and soldiers on board are Italians. Some. Then Vice Admiral Goubeau was more aware of the threat posed by these 2 warships. Your Majesty the Commander-in-Chief, I will find a way to put these 2 lone wolves in a cage. After getting the result he wanted from Goubeau, de Villiers continued, if you need anything, just tell my secretary and he will help you coordinate. I only have one request, which is to allow these 2 king ships to patrol and not threaten the connection between Indochina and the country. This will not only dissatisfy the government, but also make a lot of powerful people are not satisfied. Your Excellency, please wait for my good news. Goubeau, who put on a navy hat, turned around and left. After leaving Norodom Palace, Goubeau immediately rushed to the port. His headquarters is right next to the military port. Although he is confident in front of the commander, in fact, the 2 Venice-class patrol ships are not that easy to catch. It was previously announced that the Navy Department had obtained the specific information on the installation and patrol of these 2 ships, and specially sent it to Goubeau. It was after understanding the specific performance of these 2 Venice-class ships that he had a headache. It's fast, has strong firepower, and the armor is not weak. This was Bogu's first reaction after reading the Venetian level information. Then he felt impressed and admired those Italian warship designers for being able to design such a balanced warship. However, he had reservations about the design of the Venetian class main guns in tandem. Because he had not fought against each other yet, he did not know why it was designed like this. Didn't this mean that 2 main guns were missing when attacking head-on? However, although he admires the Italian design, his mission now is to sink the 2 Venice-class ships. Even if they cannot be sunk, they must at least lose their combat effectiveness. In fact, Goubeau also had his own ideas. The original battle plan he reported to Paris was to use the experience of the last war with the Qing dynasty to take Tangu directly, threaten the security of the Qing capital, and force the Qing government to agree to France's conditions. However, Paris is not willing to do this because it will affect the interests of other countries in China and create enemies for France, so the red line drawn for it is south of the Yangtze River facing the red line given by Paris. Goubeau was not upset. He was prepared to cut off the king's maritime routes and force the king to agree to France's conditions after suffering unacceptable losses. Of course, Goubeau has already chosen his target. Taiwan is right next to this route. If he captures Taiwan, he can threaten the king's waterway anytime and anywhere, and it can also give his fleet a foothold here. The previous attack on the Fujian Navy and the attack on the 2 Venice-class patrol ships all served this strategy. However, compared with dealing with the Fujian Navy, it is much more difficult to capture these 2 patrol ships. However, no matter how difficult it is, it will not stop him from doing it alone. His many years of experience are enough for him to have various ways to deal with it. For this reason, he returned to the headquarters and immediately summoned his deputy List B.I. just met with the governor, and he asked us to find ways to protect the safety of the waterway. Damn it, we wiped out the Fujian navy, only to have two larger patrol ships appear. These damn Italians. Lisby couldn't help but complain. Of course, more about Italy. Yes, the news that Italy sold 2 patrol ships to the Qing dynasty has long been known to the public. The explanation given by Italy is that the transaction was completed before the outbreak of the war. The reason why it was delayed until now is mainly because of the Qing people to recruit sailors anyway. In one sentence, I admit that I sold 2 ships to the Qing dynasty, but this has nothing to do with me. Of course, this is not what Gubo and others need to be concerned about. They now urgently need to understand the dynamics of the 2 Venice-class patrol ships, but the difficulty now is to send the right ship. Thinking of this Gubo and Lisby gives me a headache. Currently, there is no ship in the French fleet that can reach 18.5 knots. Only the communication ship Basval, 18.1 knots, can barely keep up, but this is a ship of less than 1,000 tons. There is not much armament on the communication ship, so it is a free gift. As for the other ships, the fastest is the 1,722-ton Jianbing reconnaissance cruiser, which only has a speed of 17.6 knots. It is not free to go up. It's pitiful to say that the solitary French fleet, although its tonnage and scale looks scary, is just some old stuff from the 1960s and 1970s. A guy who looks useless in shell armor, so it was not bad to bully the small boats of the Qing dynasty, but it was somewhat powerless to deal with the 2 technological crystallizations of the Italian shipbuilding industry. It seems that the only way to do this is to set up an ambush. After studying for a long time, Gubo put down the pen in his hand and told the deputy beside him his plan. Setting an ambush is a good idea, but how do you make the other party fall into the trap? The deputy also thought that setting up an ambush was a good idea, and also raised questions about how to get him into the trap. It's simple. Give the other party a bait they can't refuse. As long as they are tempted, there is a way to catch them. Then Gubo said that he was preparing bait. If you were the commander of the other side and heard that the enemy was sending a batch of military supplies to the front line, what would you do? Of course, I don't want the enemy to successfully complete the transportation of supplies. Lisby also smiled when he said this. He knew that, as long as the other party was tempted, he would step into a trap. But before that, good planning is needed. To do this, Gubo needs to conspire with General Miller, who is in charge of commanding the army in Biki. After all, you cannot treat the enemy as a fool and suddenly transport a large amount of military supplies for no reason. Isn't this possible? Does it make the prey confused? So every once in a while, General Miller in Biki would make a high-profile announcement that he would launch a large-scale offensive against the Qing army to let the Qing know how powerful France was. Subsequently, the French army began to become active on the Sino-Vietnamese border, and the Qing army's intelligence reports even described it as a huge crowd of foreign soldiers trying to spy on our 2 countries. This forced Zheng Guoqin, the governor of Guangdong and Guangxi, who was about to leave his post, to be very alert and ask the Qing troops stationed at the border to guard against the intrusion of the French and barbarians. Since the French army wants to prepare for the offensive, it needs sufficient military supplies. At present, North Vietnam's transportation is destined to be the most convenient by sea and water transportation. Therefore, under the escort of several cruisers and gunboats, a large number of cargo ships headed north under their protection. Coming by car. Someone said before that Mantou should write less Chinese plots, but Mantou can only regretfully say that this is not possible. Intervening in the Sino-French War is the first key point in this book and the rise of Italy. It is also the climax of the outline preparation, so it cannot be bypassed. It's simply written, but it's not satisfying for everyone. I know what the problem is. There are few updates, and everyone is not enjoying it enough. However, during the new book period, please be considerate. After all, steamed buns also need to be eaten properly. Chapter 80, The Battle of the South China Sea, Part 1. The South China Sea has been a transportation hub since ancient times. Businessmen from all over the world came to Quanzhou and Guangzhou to buy China's unique commodities such as porcelain, tea, silk, etc., and then sold them to the world. Point of course, with the development of the times, the means of transportation of merchants have also kept pace with the times. From the initial galleys and sailboats to the modern light and dark ships, the transportation artery of the South China Sea has become more prosperous. On the South China Sea near the coast of Vietnam, a large fleet of freighters is sailing slowly on the sea in a long queue. The weather was not very good today. A large number of clouds block the sunlight, making the scenery in the distance not so clear. Yes, this is the fleet departing from Sagan, and their destination is Beaky Point. The leader of the long fleet is the French fleet's wooden-hulled cruiser Volder. Point as the captain and commander of the escort fleet, Major Barrow is observing the surrounding sea surface with a telescope. Why haven't these Italians come yet? The first mate, who was doing the same thing next to him, couldn't help but complain. Faced with the first mate's complaints, Major Barrow put down his telescope and spoke. Be at ease. If you want to hunt, you need to have enough patience. But this is our third time. If the king people still don't come, then the cost will be high. Yes, organizing so many ships to run back and forth continuously with full loads requires a lot of manpower and material resources, and it all costs money. And in order to complete the show, they actually transported supplies, but they were not military supplies, just some worthless goods. This will cost more. After all, it requires manpower to move it up and down. This is not an issue that we should be concerned about. This is what General Gupo is considering. We only need to worry about when the King fleet will arrive. Faced with the first mate's excessive worries, Major Barrow corrected him. In fact, they didn't know that 2 Venice-class cruisers were sailing on the sea 30 nautical miles outside their fleet. How could Liu Buchan, the nominal commander of the fleet, not know about France's actions in the border area of North Vietnam? It was decided that the French could not continue to deliver supplies to North Vietnam under any circumstances. Of course, in order to prevent possible accidents, they did not rush to the route immediately. Instead, they waited for the French fleet to set off before rushing to the route. 2 hours later, the fleet spotted smoke from ships sailing on the east side. There's a boat on the east side, on the lookout. Sharp-eyed sailors immediately reported their findings. Let the VIP go check the situation. As the commander of the escort fleet, Major Barrow immediately issued the order. The VIP is a gunboat made of iron and wood. It is mainly responsible for escort and offshore operations. It has a displacement of 471 tons, is equipped with 9 various artillery pieces, and has a maximum speed of 10.14 knots. When the messenger on the Volder sent Major Barrow's order to the VIP in a semaphore, the gunboat immediately left the formation and rushed to the east side, where the ship was found. This sudden intrusion of ships has happened many times before, so this time the VIP was just making a routine inquiry and planned to let the intruding ships leave quickly. It's just that this time it's destined to be different. After a while, not only the figure that broke into the ship could be seen from the observation deck, but also other people on the ship could see its figure. Although the specific figure of the ship could not be seen clearly due to the distance and weather, everyone was there. Or thought flashed through my mind, the boat was coming so fast. There are 2 incoming ships. At this time, the sailors on the observation deck finally used their binoculars to discover that there were 2 incoming ships, and everyone immediately increased their vigilance. Command, all ships prepare for battle, since there are 2 ships and the speed is so fast. In Major Barrow's heart, the incoming ship is most likely the target he wants to wait for, so he first issues an order for each ship to prepare for battle. Following his words, each ship in the escort fleet immediately rang the battle bell, and the sailors rushed to their fighting positions. It didn't take long for Major Barrow to prove that he was very foresight. He saw the VIP sending a signal. The incoming ships were the Ziyuan and Jingbian that Italy sold to the Qing dynasty. Because the flag of the Qing dynasty was flying, it had been clearly seen by the officers and soldiers on the VIP. Let the cargo ship leave immediately according to the scheduled plan, and let the vessel immediately contact General Guba and tell him that the prey has taken the bait. In fact, there was no need for him to notify the vessel. This liaison ship also saw the VIP's semaphore and immediately turned its bow and evacuated to the rear because he only knew one mission. He needed to inform General Goober, who was hanging behind him, of the news as soon as the Qing Dynasty's patrol arrived. After issuing this series of orders, Major Barrow immediately issued another order. Have the other ships move closer to me immediately to meet the incoming enemy ships. That's right, Major Barrow wants to use his weak fleet to entangle the incoming enemy and create an opportunity for General Goober behind him to surround him. As for Liu Buchan and the two captains Gomes and Leifer, the response of the French fleet to the surprise attack was too fast, which made them feel a little unusual. The French reacted too quickly. After putting down the telescope looking at the French fleet, Liu Buchan expressed his doubts to Captain Leifer beside him. I saw it too, but now is not the time to worry about the enemy's reaction. Now we need to decide whether to fight or not. Leifer, who had the same idea, was now more concerned about the approaching French escort warships. This question stumped Liu Buchan. Although he had served on a British warship before, he had not experienced a naval battle, so this made him undecided. What do you think? In the end, Liu Buchan handed over this question to the person next to him. After spending so much time with Leifer, Liu Buchan admired his ability very much. Therefore, if he didn't understand or couldn't make up his mind, he would ask directly, and the other party would always give a reasonable answer solution. Now, we have to fight, otherwise the French will be too arrogant. Looking at the approaching French warships, their combined tonnage was even inferior to that of the Zeeuwen under his own seat. If he didn't fight, he wouldn't be giving the opponent a chance to show off his power. Then, let's fight. As Liu Buchan made his decision, the messenger immediately sent his order to the Jinggyuan behind him, and then two patrol ships loaded with more than 7,000 tons immediately went up to meet it. As the two parties get closer, each other can clearly see each other's every move. Damn it, these Italians are so shameless, they dare to collude with the heretics. Major Barrow, who saw clearly the crew members on the other side's ship through the binoculars, cursed fiercely. However, in his heart, he was worried about the next battle. The enemy was not weak and could bully the Chinese, but the Italians. The next battle gave him a shadow in his heart. Although Italy's army is looked down upon, its navy still has some strength. Tell all ships to brace themselves. We are fighting the Italians. Following Major Barrow's order, a flurry of greetings to the Italians rang out from each ship. Major Barrow, on the other hand, was staring at the opponent's warship, and the sound of continuous reports from the observers came to his ears. Distance 8,000 meters. Distance 6,000 meters. 5,000 meters away. 4,800. Order all ships to open fire. Following Major Barrow's order, each ship of this small fleet fired angry artillery fire at the two incoming warships. Among them, the Zeeuwen ship received most of the firepower. In this round of shooting, the Zeeuwen ship erupted with 3 explosions at the bow and sides of the ship, which caused cheers on the French warship. It's just that they were happy a little early. When the smoke cleared, the hull with the paint blown off was revealed. The Venice-class armor with an average of 129mm withstood the 140 and 160mm firepower of the French warships. Get ready to continue shooting immediately. Not satisfied with the result, Major Barrow continued to issue orders. However, the firing speed of naval guns now is very impressive. Even a 140mm naval gun basically takes more than 1 minute. While the French ship was loading, the two patrol ships were still approaching 4,000 meters. Amid another notification from the observer, the French warship continued to fire, but the result was no different. Not without distinction, a 57mm naval gun on the Zeeuwen was hit, and several sailors on duty fell in a pool of blood. 3,500 meters. 3,000 meters. After withstanding several rounds of artillery fire from French warships, the second ship Zhejiang finally opened fire. The 254mm main gun and 150mm secondary gun they equipped jointly aimed at their first prey, the cruiser US Fort Reno. This ship was chosen for the simple reason that it looked larger and had more firepower. Up to 8 254mm and 6 150mm naval guns gave this wooden-hulled cruiser a stormy baptism. Such powerful firepower is simply not something the Fort Reno can withstand. Its captain, Chambers, and its first mate, Cabeza, were killed on the spot. The hull was penetrated, the ammunition was detonated, and corpses fell to the ground on the deck. It was a tragic scene. At this time, everyone could tell that the cruiser Fort Reno was hopeless. Even its surviving officers and soldiers could see that, and they all chose to jump into the sea to escape. The firepower of the second ship's engine shocked the French present. They did not expect the enemy's firepower to be so fierce. Although they are two 7,000-ton cruisers, one 1,800-ton cruiser should not be scrapped in one round. In fact, what does this mean? You must know that the 254mm naval gun on the Xijing second ship has a caliber of up to 30 times. These 8 guns alone cost £97,000. It is not comparable to those 140 and 160mm naval guns on French warships with 18 to 24 times the ventriloquism. The tactic used by the second ship Xijing this time was to rely on its own advantages in all aspects to treat its own warship as an armored ship and fire at the opponent's head. Let these small French warships have a taste of the feeling of artillery riding in the face. The second ship Xijing then named other warships in turn, including the gunboat Ludin, the gunboat Viper, and the cruiser Volta. In just over half an hour, 5 of the 7 escorting warships had been sunk or sunk, fighting to the point of losing combat effectiveness. The remaining 2 gunboats were struggling even more under its lustful power. Just as the second ship Xijing planned to deal with the 2 small gunboats and then pursue the transport ship, the observer suddenly discovered that something was wrong. A large number of smoke pillars appeared in the north, east and south. At a glance, it was clear that many ships were coming. If you can come here at this time, then you must have bad intentions. Yes, General Guba finally led his fleet to complete the encirclement, but by the time he arrived, most of the warships he had left as bait had been wiped out. As for the second ship Xijing, whether it is escaping or using other tactics, it will take a fight. There is nothing to say next, just prepare for the next battle. Late. Sorry. Chapter 81, The Battle of the South China Sea, Part 2. Facing the enemies from 3 sides, Liu Buchan, as the nominal commander of the second ship Xijing, faced the French warships that were surrounded from 3 sides. His expression changed drastically. Now, where should we break out? It was obvious that they had fallen into a trap and were surrounded by each other. Breaking through is certain, but which way they break out is related to their success or failure. Lifa was extremely calm at this time because he knew that every decision now was related to the safety of their small fleet, so every decision needed to be made carefully. For this reason, Lifa and Liu Buchan personally climbed up to the observation deck and were responsible for observing French warships in 3 directions. First of all, there are the least number of warships coming from the south, only about 6 or 7. Next are the warships to the north, which look like there are nearly 10. Finally, the east side has the most warships. There are actually 15 or 6 warships in total. The number of enemy warships is different, but it does not mean that there is also a huge gap in their strength. Since it is a breakout, you need to choose the weakest side. Generally speaking, choosing the side with the fewest enemy ships is a good choice. However, in Lifa's view, this should be impossible. The enemy had deliberately set a trap, and it was certainly impossible to leave such an obvious flaw. Maybe this was the enemy's strongest part. Moreover, if the breakthrough to the south is successful, although it will directly threaten France's route, it will also increase the difficulty of returning, which is not appropriate at all. In fact, Lifa did not know that he had made the wisest decision, because it was Guba who led the interception formation composed of 5 armored ships and 2 other gunboats in the south. It was helpless to say that. According to Gubo's original intention, he originally planned to place his formation in the north, because in his opinion, after the prey fell into the trap, the first reaction must be to escape towards home. That's why he wanted to place his strongest ironclad in the north. But sometimes the plan could not be reflected in his will, especially when he thought of Commander de Villiers' emphasis on trade routes and the calculations of interests by dignitaries. So in the end, for the sake of safety, he chose to guard the south and not give it a chance to threaten the trade routes. Since he stayed in the south, he naturally had proper arrangements for the north, which was very likely to be broken through. He arranged the warship formation in the north. He only had 3 first-class cruisers on hand, the Dils, the Dujux Rowan, 3189 tons, and the Dowell, 5698 tons, including the Ducis Lewin. An enlarged version of the US, are all in this formation, and then there are second-class cruisers, Faras, 2382 tons, Magan, 2382 tons, third-class cruisers, Walder, 1323 tons, Amirin, 1323 tons, Lee, 1191 tons, and some other warships. Although there are no ironclads in the formation, they are the essence of cruisers. These warships selected by Goober basically have not been in service for too long. For example, the Faras only entered service in 1881, and the other ships either entered service in the past 5 years, or they are energetic. Anyway, the formation to the north is not easy to mess with at all. Although they are not capable of sinking 2 Venice-class ships on the spot, it is still a mistake to entangle them. As for the east side, it is composed of other remaining warships. Although the various indicators are worse, the siege strategy of relying on the numerical advantage and using many ants to kill the elephant is still effective. What about Simeon? Sorry, the west is offshore. Faced with the situation of not knowing the local sea conditions, the commander will only go offshore, unless he is crazy. If he encounters a reef, he will not be able to cry. Facing the malicious French warships coming from 3 sides, Captain Leifer, as the actual commander, gave the order after some consideration, which he was later very happy about. Aim east, move forward at full speed. What? Leifer's words startled Liu Buchan. Captain Leifer, you don't need to think about it again. Don't think about it, just do as I say. From here you can see the gap between the two. Leifer was decisive enough. No wonder he would achieve such great success later. Liu Buchan could only end in tragedy. Although he won the title of national hero, he did not perform well in future naval battles. It's not that Mantou looks down on this national hero, but in terms of ability, Liu Buchan didn't have many outstanding performances in the Sino-Japanese War. His introduction is full of heroic battles. As a commander, this is not qualified. Following Leifer's order, the 2 Venice-class cruisers immediately made a turn and rushed directly to the east. The action of the second ship Zijing to break out of the encirclement eastward shocked Goober. I didn't expect that my falsehood would be seen through. However, he had no good solution to this problem and could only order the armored formation to rush east immediately. The cruiser formation in the north also rushed over at full speed after seeing the 2 King warships breaking out eastward. Compared with the armored ship formation, which can only reach a speed of 11 to 12 knots, the speed of the formation is based on the lowest speed warship. The cruise fleet in the north can maintain a high speed of 14 to 15 knots, but no matter how they chased them, the 2 brand new Venice class boats could run at a top speed of 18.6 knots, so they could only see the distance between the 3 gradually widening. As the commander of the eastern formation, Rear Admiral Lisby immediately issued an order after seeing 2 Venice-class battleships coming towards him. Immediately order the ships to disperse according to the plan and meet them. Following Rear Admiral Lisby's order, more than a dozen warships of various types spread out like a large net and mounted patrol covers on the 2 ships. The second ship Zijing was not afraid and rushed towards the big net. The distance between the 2 sides was getting closer and closer when the observing sailors loudly announced their arrival. At 5,000 meters, the artillery fire from both sides sounded at the same time. Boom, boom, boom. A large amount of water jets appeared near the 2 Venice-class cruisers. The first round of shots from the 2 sides approaching at high speed did not hit the other, but that's okay. There's still next time point. But at this time Leifer issued a new order. Turn 30 degrees to the right. Following Leifer's order, the Ziyuan and Jingyuan no longer faced the French formation head-on, but exposed their sides as the commander of the eastern formation of the French fleet. Rear Admiral Lisby certainly knew what his opponent wanted to do. He wanted to briefly seize the T position and exert firepower from the side immediately. Order the formation to turn 30 degrees to the left, and we will also turn, following Major General Lisbeth's order. The French Eastern Formation also turned, allowing both sides to exert flanking firepower. In addition, if the routes of both sides do not change, they will collide in a few minutes, and Rear Admiral Lisbeth's task of entangling the second ship Zijing will be over fulfilled point, although the loss will not be small by then, compared with taking down two 7,000-ton Venice-class ships. This loss is still acceptable point faced with Major General Lisbeth's wishful thinking. Leifer certainly did not want to see it. Then he gave the order again, turn right another 15 degrees, he planned to use his speed to distance the 2 point. Although I don't have a girl to accompany me on Chinese Valentine's Day today, I still plan to have some fun. Today is just one chapter. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 80 to the Battle of the South China Sea, Part 2. Boom. A huge explosion sounded from the cruiser Peng Gang. The gun at the stern of the ship exploded. A 140mm naval gun was blown into the sky, revealing a hole nearly 8 meters wide. The seawater the surge came over, and its boiler and steam engine had stopped, leaving the Peng Gang motionless on the dangerous battlefield point. Rear Admiral Lisbeth's eyes turned red when he saw this scene on his command ship, the cruiser La Pérouse. I relied on many years of experience to surround the two battleships, but the strength in my hands was weaker. Although I surrounded the opponent, the strength in my hands could not cause enough damage to them. The 160mm and 140mm the naval guns cannot pose a sufficient threat to them at all. Only 193mm and above naval guns can threaten these two warships. However, there are very few warships in our fleet equipped with 193mm and above naval guns. The total number is less than 10. There is no way to get close to the door just now. The Peng Gang tried to get closer, but was met with concentrated fire from two Venice-class cruisers. Its armor was like paper in front of the enemy's large-caliber long-barreled naval gun. 2 rounds of shooting turned into so point. Looking at the two Venice-class patrol ships that were still punishing the murderers, Major General Lisbeth could only give an order. Send a semaphore and ask all ships to pay attention to their distance. Don't let these two Italian-made warships increase their speed. After giving the order, he took a look at the large cruiser formation about 8 nautical miles away, and the armored ship formation about 10 nautical miles away. As long as they enter the scene, these two Qing Dynasty's last maritime forces in the South China Sea will be completely destroyed. Give closure point. If Major General Lisbeth could discover something, how could the 3 Qing commanders who were among them not know about it? It was clear what they were about to face. In which direction should we break through now, Liu? Buckhan looked at the French warships in all directions, his expression becoming a little nervous. I don't blame him. Anyone would be nervous when encountering such a situation. As de facto commander, Leifer pointed in one direction. We break out from here. What, Liu? Buckhan was shocked when he saw Leifer pointing in the direction, because he was pointing to the southeast, which would shorten the distance between his enemy's armored ships. Don't you reconsider? No, let's do it this way. After answering Liu Buckhan, Leifer gave the order loudly. Target southeast, prepare to break through. The reason why Leifer chose the southeast to break out was very simple. Because the enemy warships basically focused on the east, so there were the most enemy ships to the east, and it was very difficult to force a breakthrough. Not to mention that the two ships have not reached angle of attack. Of course there is an angle of attack, but he will not attack his opponent. His own battleship is so expensive, and these second-rate goods in front of him are not worth it. Following Leifer's order, the two ships Ziyuan and Jingyuan immediately moved left and right in the encirclement, waiting for an opportunity. When the two cruisers Champlain and Sunny in the southeast did not cooperate well and exposed a gap of nearly 500 meters, Leifer felt that an opportunity had come. Now, full speed southeast, between two enemy ships. Leifer's order caused the second ship Zijing to immediately accelerate towards it. Major General Lesby, who was commanding the battle, was shocked when he saw the actions of the second ship Zijing. Send a semaphore immediately and ask the Champlain and Sawney to turn immediately. We can't let them escape. Although Major General Lesby did not say who they were, it was all obvious. But is it too late to remember to close the gap at this time? Seeing the enemy ships in the encirclement rushing towards the gap desperately, other warships responsible for the siege immediately rushed forward. At this time, they completely ignored the powerful firepower of the two patrol ships. They only knew that, if they let these two ships, if they run away, it will be difficult to catch them. Therefore, they fired the most violent artillery fire at the Zijing second ship that was speeding past. Of course, the Zijing second ship was not a vegetarian. Its powerful firepower also made these warships who tried to stop it suffer. The worst among them was Rigard. The Genu's power compartment was hit by a 254mm artillery shell, causing it to lose power and stop motionless on the sea. In a normal naval battle, it will become a target ship for enemy ships. Fortunately, the enemy is on the run now and can't care about it. After seeing that none of the ships could stop the two patrol ships, the cruiser Suoni suddenly made a bold move. It turned its bow and rushed directly towards the second ship Zijing. His intention is already very obvious. He will stop the Zijing second ship, even if he loses his own warship. When a warship of less than 2,000 tons collides with a warship of 7,000 tons, the result is self-evident. Affected by the crazy move of the Sawney, another cruiser, the Champlain, also made the same move. Now, in front of the second ship Zijing, two enemy ships were charging towards them menacingly, one to the left and one to the right. Faced with such a critical moment, Leifer was unusually calm, because every decision he made was related to the life and death of nearly 1,000 officers and soldiers on the two ships. Keep full speed, don't slow down. The artillery targets the battleship on the right side first and stops it first. Damage. Control team, immediately put aside other matters and prepare for possible collision situations. As Leifer issued orders one after another, everyone on the ship quickly received orders, and the tension that had not yet arisen was diluted. Of course, this is just a dilution. If the enemy ships still rush over like this, it will be difficult to ensure that the tense atmosphere does not spread. 5,500 meters, 5,000 meters, 4,500 meters, especially when the observer hand is constantly reporting the distance between the two parties. Fortunately, they were lucky. In the next shooting, a 254mm shell hit the bow of the Sunny near the waterline. So after a bang, a large hole was blown out of the bow of the cruiser Sunny, and seawater poured in directly along this place. On the bow of the ship, although such a large hole is not a fatal injury, it affects the speed of the ship abnormally. I saw that the speed of the Sunny dropped directly from the full speed of 15.1 knots to 10.2 knots. As a result, its speed and that of the cruiser Champlain were immediately separated. This is a good opportunity. After seeing that the Sunny was slowed down, Leifer continued to issue the order, go southeast, 15 degrees to the left. Then aim at the Champlain and continue firing. Following Leifer's order, the second ship Zijing veered a little to the left. Although it was not too far, it allowed the main gun at the stern to attack the cruiser Champlain, which was charging straight. Boom, boom, boom. After a round of tail gunfire, the Champlain, which had been hit by several rounds, still remained unabated. 3,000 meters, when the observer reported two distances. Two shells fell on the Zealand, and one of them hit a distance of more than 10 meters from Leifer. Fortunately, the current shells still use black powder. If it were replaced by smokeless medicine, then Leifer is destined to lose his fortune, and maybe a memorial service will be held. After getting up from the deck in embarrassment, Leifer gritted his teeth. Inflict full firepower on the Champlain. Therefore, as long as all the artillery of the second ship Zijing can be reached, they will output firepower at the Champlain. In particular, several 254mm naval guns, with a barrel body of up to 30 times the caliber, provide sufficient accuracy. Therefore, with the kind care of the two Venice-class ships, the last 3,000 meters of the Champlain was extremely difficult. When it reached 1000 meters, the bow of the Champlain was blown off point without the bow. The Champlain's speed was even worse than that of the Sawney, and she could only watch the 2 Venetian-class ships drifting past in front of her eyes. After getting rid of the 2 enemy ships, the people on the 2 ships cheered because they knew that they had broken through the siege and no one could stop them now. As for Lieutenant General Gubo, who planned the ambush, he was also so angry that he vomited blood at the news of the 2 ships breakout. This was the end of this somewhat anticlimactic naval battle. I'm sorry, I was lazy yesterday and didn't make excuses. I want to say here that many people may not be satisfied with the somewhat anticlimactic naval battle. Of course, Mantou does not want to write it like this. However, after neutralizing the actual situation, Mantou thinks this is the most reasonable, because after all, there are too many ants to kill the elephant, and 2 patrol ships, although they are better than their opponents in terms of fire protection and speed, these are the only 2 ships in the hands of the Qing dynasty. If there is an emergency, everything will be lost. It was impossible to continue to let these 2 ships go to sea after encountering an ambush. Therefore, the drama of subsequent attacks on French transportation lines ended. Chapter 83 Follow-up. The naval battle came to an end with the escape of the 2nd ship Zhejiang. In this naval battle, the French stole the chicken, but lost the rice. More than 10 battleships were lost, including the cruiser Ennoberg, the cruiser Volta, and the cruiser Primogay. The combined tonnage of these battleships was more than 13,000 tons. As for the loss of more than 800 personnel, this loss was not much. It's not serious as for the 2nd ship Zhejiang, that China participated in the war this time. Although it escaped unscathed, it was not without losses. Both ships suffered considerable losses in this naval battle. The Zhejiang lost 3 150mm secondary main guns, as well as 8 75mm and 57mm secondary guns, as well as the twin 254mm main batteries on the aft deck, because it was hit by too many bullets, causing it to jam. Despite emergency repairs by the ship's personnel, the rear main turret was still jammed, and was in urgent need of repair compared with the Zhejiang. The Jingguan is much better. At least its main gun is intact, but there are still some losses. 2 150mm secondary main guns and 6 75mm and 57mm secondary guns were also considerable losses of course. Except for the main guns, the appearance of the 2 warships was full of holes, and even the armor plates had fallen off in some places. But after all, they won. Their spirits were different, and now they had an elite or a point. However, on the way back, the small fleet had a dispute. You said there's no way to fix it. Lifa looked at Liu Buckhan in surprise. Facing Lifa's piercing eyes, Liu Buckhan lowered his head. Yes, the largest shipyard in our country can only accommodate ships of 5,000 tons, and it is a shipyard run by the British in Shanghai. Facing Liu Buckhan's answer, Lifa, who had just made great contributions in the breakout battle, couldn't help but ask, so what is the largest shipyard you currently have, and how big of a ship can it accommodate for repairs? There is a shipyard in Lushan in northern my country that can accommodate 4,000 tons. Liu, I remember that your 2 Saxon improved ships are returning to China, right? We can't go back now. If you can return to China, where will you go for maintenance? Liu Buckhan, who was so annoyed, could only sigh secretly. Among the many things the Navy had done, he had forgotten this. He was really unqualified as an assistant. However, now that there is a lack of maintenance dock, the 2nd ship Zhejiang can only drag its injured body and carry out simple repairs. It can be said that most of the tasks that Gubo failed to complete were achieved with the help of the Qing people's own divine assistance. The naval battle between China and France in the South China Sea has come to an end, but this is not a battle without spectators. The gunboat HMS Leopard of the British Far East Fleet happened to witness this battle with his own eyes, and of course he happened to do it at the right time. However, Captain Bide described the performance of both parties in this naval battle in detail in his report, and finally he made a concluding comment. Dear General David, both sides in this naval battle performed wonderfully. General Guba showed his excellent planning ability. It can be said that this battle to ambush 2 Venice-class cruisers met his expectations at the beginning. He completely led two king warships into the trap, but unfortunately, his net was too worn, and the prey escaped. After praising General Gubo, Captain Bai changed the subject. Compared with the abilities of General Guba, the King People's performance was not bad this time, but compared with the experienced Vice Admiral, they were lacking in experience. Of course, this wonderful naval battle, the encirclement and suppression and counter-encirclement and suppression battles were very exciting. However, what impressed me most about this naval battle was the two Venice-class cruisers. Their performance in the naval battle was amazing. It was a perfect combination of firepower, protection and speed. I have reason to believe that the Empire will also need to face such a situation in the future. As the results of this naval battle are known to all countries, I believe that a wave of large-scale construction of armored cruisers will definitely come. Then at this time, the Empire's maritime trade lines will face a more complicated situation. Captain Bide's report was handed over directly to the Admiralty in London by General David, commander of the British Empire's Far East Fleet, without changing a word. This made many people in the Navy Department interested in it, and a colonel named Fisher paid the most attention to it. Of course, this is not the focus. The current focus is still the Sino-French War in the Far East. The fleet encirclement and suppression of the second ship Zijing failed, causing considerable losses to itself. As the fleet commander and the person in charge of this plan, General Guba submitted his resignation to Paris immediately. In his resignation, Guba placed all the responsibilities on himself. The Admiralty in Paris was not an unreasonable person and immediately rejected Guba's resignation and asked him to continue his efforts to bring China to its knees as soon as possible. For this reason, the Navy Department also dispatched 6 large cruisers, including the first-class cruiser Acosta and the first-class cruiser Petrescu, based on the battle report he provided, to support General Gubo in the Far East. These 6 large cruisers are not comparable to the ships under Gubo. These 6 cruisers are all large tonnage cruisers of 5,000 to 6,000 tons. Considering the speed of the 2 Venice-class ships up to 18.56 knots, these 6 large cruisers are all it can run at a speed of more than 16 knots, and the Acosta can even run at a speed of 17.5 knots. As for why there is no large cruiser that can compete with the speed of the Venice class, it is because before this, no country had thought of building a cruiser so fast. After all, the cost of each increase in speed is not low at all. Of course, in addition to these 6 cruisers, France has also sent 3 liaison ships, all of which are the latest models, and have just been in service. They can all run at a speed of 19 knots. It can be said that in order to deal with the 2 Venice-class patrol ships, the French Navy selected elite soldiers and strong generals. Although the French Navy is preparing to reinforce the Far East Fleet, this will also take time. It will basically take a month for these ships to arrive in the Far East. However, in the face of the defeat in the naval battle, the French side was certainly unwilling to accept it. However, the Navy was temporarily unable to invade the north, and could only consider looking for opportunities on land. For this reason, as the top commander of the French route army in Berry-Key, General Miller certainly had the responsibility to restore France's honor. So in early June 1884, more than 3,000 French troops launched a surprise attack on the King troops, stationed in Berry-Key near Langsun. The King army launched an attack. Although they had repeatedly raised their vigilance, the King army stationed in Billy was still no match for the French army. Under the attack of the French army, the more than 3,000 King army could not resist for long before they collapsed. Flee into the country. After solving the King army in Berry-Lee, the French army then launched an attack on Langsun. Pandingsin, the governor of Guangxi, retreated without a fight. Half a month later, the French army invaded Zenan Pass. Due to insufficient troops and difficulty in supplying supplies, they burned the pass and retreated to the line between Winyuan and Langsun. The French army's continuous victories on land were enough to cover up the defeat at sea, and for a while the French became arrogant again. Of course, they did not forget the Italians hiding behind the Qing dynasty. 2 updates today, and one more chapter. Chapter 84 continue to intervene. King Carlo, on behalf of France, I express the strongest condemnation of your country's violation of the Neutrality Treaty. His Excellency Plamon Goodwin, the French ambassador to Italy, was in Carlo raising the voice of protest from France. The tone was so strong that it was unprecedented. Faced with the French ambassador's most angry expression ever, Carlo accidentally yawned. Carlo's move was like a big hand grabbing the French ambassador's throat, making him instantly lose his desire to speak. Seeing the constipated expression on Ambassador Goodwin's face, Carlo said embarrassedly, "I'm sorry, Mr. Ambassador, I didn't sleep well yesterday. Don't mind it and continue. Go on, you big-headed idiot, and your whole family will continue. You don't have to be so casual if you want to find an excuse. Good diplomatic etiquette allowed Ambassador Goodwin to resist the urge to burst out, and the diplomatic rhetoric he originally wanted to speak could not continue. I'm sorry, His Majesty the King. Perhaps I need to suggest to Paris that you should carefully consider the diplomatic relations between our two countries. After all, he still couldn't hold it back, and Ambassador Goodwin still said a harsh word before leaving. Of course, we don't know whether Ambassador Goodwin has the ability to fulfill his cruel words. However, Ambassador Goodwin has decided to report to Paris that some worrying changes have taken place in Italy. Perhaps Italy's attitude on the Tunisian issue should not have been ignored initially. Looking at the French ambassador leaving, Carlo felt helpless. In fact, he did not lie to the French ambassador. He really slept late last night. Today, the French ambassador hurried over early in the morning to protest. It is normal for him to yawn. If the French ambassador was unhappy, Carlo didn't bother to care about him. He didn't take the French threat to heart at all. As for why the ambassador did not find the prime minister who holds real power, but found himself, the reason is simple, that is, Prime Minister desperate is through all the matters regarding Italy's involvement in the Sino-French war. Carlo point. No matter it's big or small, he doesn't care. How could Carlo not understand the prime minister's intentions? After throwing all the problems to himself, no matter good or bad, it had nothing to do with him anymore. So under this situation, Carlo was actually a little busy. Last night he was discussing the situation of the Sino-French war with the military people. He talked a little too much, so he went to bed late. This is not a lie to the French ambassador. As for whether yawning means he went to bed late, this is a matter of opinion. While he was thinking about this, the captain of the guard, Filmic, came in with a telegram. "Your Majesty, this is a telegram from the Far East. Show it to me quickly." Upon hearing that it was a telegram from the Far East, Carlo immediately became energetic. After opening it, he couldn't help but curse. These king people don't even have a shipyard for repairs. What are they doing? This telegram is not a complaint telegram sent by Leifa, Gomes and others, but a procurement telegram. 2 Venice-class patrol ships. After a naval battle, they still need to be repaired and damaged. The turret and barrel also need to be replaced. In addition, so many shells have been fired that they always need to be replenished. So this is a procurement telegram, mainly for the purchase of artillery, ammunition and other parts for the Ziyuan and Jingyuan ships. It's just that Leifa and others wrote it in the telegram as a joke, that the Qing dynasty did not have a dock to accommodate 2 warships. When Carlo saw such a strange situation, he naturally cursed. After all, this was related to his control of power. If the Qing dynasty suffered a huge loss, then don't think about anything. Wait until he becomes an adult to see what he can do from the hands of the prime minister. Ask for as many rights as you want. If he wins, this could wrest some power directly from the prime minister. I believe anyone with a little knowledge of power struggles can see the difference between the two. That's why Carlo is so concerned about me, Qing dynasty. This is related to his own personal interests, of course. In addition to purchasing weapons and supplies, this telegram also introduced their situation. After fighting France in the South China Sea, they received even more courtesy in the Qing dynasty. It is said that the Qing dynasty planned to grant them the honorary title of Bachulu. In addition, knowing that they paid more attention to medals, they also specially prepared gold dragon medals for them to commend their heroic performance. As for Liu Bukhan, he was also promoted, but they couldn't remember his official name, and they still call him Major Liu. And now they are sailing to Shanghai. The reason why they came to Shanghai is to repair the Ziyuan and Jingyuan ships. Although there is no shipyard suitable for them in Shanghai, there are a large number of skilled shipyard workers here, which can speed up their repairs on the 2 ships. Moreover, Shanghai has initially shown itself as an international city, with features that are more suitable for Leifa and others to adapt to life. After all, they have just fought a war and need some red wine steaks to reward them. In addition, there are milk bread, etc. that are more suitable for them. Western style food. Although there are chefs on board, anyone who has been with people on a warship must know that their main function is to keep them hungry. As for the news that France was preparing to reinforce the Far East, Carlo had already sent a telegram to Whirlwind, the minister to the Qing dynasty. As for when the minister would inform the Qing dynasty, that was his question. I believe that the Qing dynasty will not know anything about this. As for how to deal with it, it is their own business. But now, Carlo still needs to strongly support the king's anti-French cause. After Carlo put down the telegram, he spoke to the captain of the guard. Prepare the weapons and supplies on this list as soon as possible, as you command, your majesty. The captain of the guard bowed slightly and prepared to leave. Wait a minute, what are your orders, your majesty? As for the navy, are they studying a new patrol equipment? Yes, Admiral Gorek is currently organizing people to study the battle report sent back by Leifer and the others. In response to the issues raised in the report, Admiral Gorek has asked the designers of Anderschel shipyard to come up with improvement plans. The captain of the guard's answer made Carlo very satisfied. It seems that the Navy is not impatient enough to start construction immediately and can bear to wait a while. Of course, it wasn't just this that Carlo called the captain of the guard. He continued to ask, has the ship that transported that batch of goods arrived in Guangzhou? It has not arrived yet. The latest news was sent back from Singapore yesterday. They are currently preparing for the final journey. Filmic could tell that the king was a little nervous. He was responsible for arranging for people to load this batch of supplies onto the ship, but he didn't know what to worry about. The ships are all British cargo ships, and they are also fast cargo ships. The entire process was kept under the highest level of secrecy. How dare France intercept and inspect a British merchant ship? Carlo didn't know what Felix Mackey was thinking, but could he not worry? There was a big killer on this ship, specifically targeting the French. After 2 chapters are completed, you must leave a recommendation vote. Chapter 85 Maxim's First Experience, Part 1. Guangzhou City is still so lively and prosperous. As the only foreign port, most of the prosperity of Guangzhou City is based on foreign trade. Even the Portuguese Macau and now the British Hong Kong still cannot shake Guangzhou's status in South China. Even during the war with France, merchant ships from various countries continued to arrive in Guangzhou. They transported goods purchased from various countries and then transported specialties from China from Guangzhou. In such an environment, a British merchant ship named Azalea docked at Shaanxi Pier inconspicuously. However, after the Azalea docked, it did not immediately find coolies to load and unload the cargo. Instead, it continued to dock calmly. It was not until night that the unloading of goods began under the protection of a group of officers and soldiers. In this dark environment, a group of obviously unusual people stood aside and watched silently. Anyone who knows them will be surprised to see this group of people, because these people are extraordinary. Standing at the top of the list is Zhang Zedong, the new governor of Guangdong and Guangxi, and standing next to him is Howard, an Italian white glove businessman who has recently become famous in the Far East. Your Excellency Governor Zhang, this time our company hid it from other countries and spent a lot of effort to finally transport 3,000 fast guns and 27 steel cannons. These are all standard equipment of our country and can definitely add some value to your country. Help. It was Howard, an Italian businessman, who spoke, and Governor Zhang nodded in response to Howard's words. Thank you for your company's strong support. I, Zhang, will definitely express my gratitude to your company for your selfless help. Although Howard owns a company, who is behind it is basically an open secret in the Far East. The French minister cursed Italy's shamelessness in public more than once, and almost had a physical conflict with Italian minister Whirlwind. Because of this, faced with the conflict between the two foreign ministers, many people acted like they were watching a western. However, for Zhang Zedong, he had no intention of watching such a western scene. The main reason was that the situation in Guangdong and Guangxi made him restless. Before he took office in Guangxi, Zhang Nanpi was worried about the current war with the French. He did not expect that after taking office, Pan Dingxin, the governor of Guangxi, gave him such a big surprise, which almost made him breathless. He, Pan Dingxin, had lost his master and humiliated his country and was destined to be implicated by him. Even if he was Li Hefer's subordinate, he could not stop Zhang Nanpi's determination. Point of course, the impeachment of Pan Dingxin can be put aside for the time being. The most important thing is to guard the country and not let the French invade Guangdong and Guangxi, otherwise he will suffer the same consequences. So during that time, Zhang Nanpi looted the land and tried to supplement enough food and wages for the frontline soldiers. During that time, there were nursery rhymes about Zhang Nanpi in the city. When adults entered Guangzhou city, the blue sky was 3 feet high again. Needless to say, this is scolding Zhang Zidong for scratching the ground. But he also admitted this. As long as the French were not allowed to invade Guangdong and Guangxi, the ground would be scraped 3 feet away. The princes in the court could understand his painstaking efforts. The issue of food and wages is easy to solve, but those on the front line kept clamoring for foreign guns and cannons in order to withstand the French offensive. Food and wages can still be raised locally, but there is no place to buy foreign guns and cannons. Since the war with France, those foreigners have stopped selling firearms to the court. Even if they offered a high price, these money-minded foreigners would shake their heads like rattles, each one saying that they must follow the principle of neutrality and not sell ordnance and other supplies to the court. Just when he was troubled by this, the white glove Howard from Italy came to visit quietly and told Zhang Zidong that he had a batch of arms for sale. After learning the news, Zhang Zidong was immediately overjoyed and quickly expressed that he wanted them all. Although this batch of ordnance is a bit expensive, it can still be bought. There is some money in the treasury, so this is simple. The governor of Guangdong and Guangxi invited the wealthy businessmen in the city to a banquet, so he could naturally raise all the money. This is not just after receiving the weapons, but also to personally look at these foreign guns and cannons. After waiting for the unloading to be completed, Governor Zhang walked over in person. Howard was also a clever man and asked someone to open a gun box and take out a Vitry M1870 rifle. Your Majesty the Governor, this is our country's standard rifle, the Vitry quick gun. This gun can fire quickly. A skilled soldier can fire 12 rounds a minute, and the effective range reaches 600 meters. Howard introduced the rifle in his hand eloquently, and Governor Zhang listened with interest without any impatience. Howard had spent so much time teaching king officials, so of course he knew what they were interested in. So after a brief introduction to the Vitry rifle, he led everyone to the cannons, which were covered with waterproof canvas. After lifting the canvas to reveal a cannon with a steely air, Zhang Zidong and others immediately showed great interest. Everyone, this is an 85mm fast cannon manufactured by our country's Turin arsenal. Its maximum range is 4,200 meters and its maximum rate of fire is 4 rounds per minute. This is the best fast cannon our company can produce so far. Not bad, very good. Looking at the fast cannon in front of him and listening to the data introduced by Howard, Governor Zhang nodded in praise. Don't think that Governor Zhang doesn't understand the performance of weapons. You must know that this is a major change that has not happened in 3,000 years. The strength of foreign ships and artillery is engraved in everyone's heart. As an ambitious person, how could Governor Zhang not understand this? Not to mention that as the governor of Guangdong and Guangxi, his army was still at war with the French, and he needed to understand the performance of weapons. By the way, what kind of cannon is this, Governor? Zhang asked, pointing to a figure that was also covered with canvas, but much smaller. Your Majesty the Governor, please allow me to solemnly introduce this to our company's newly developed secret weapon, the Maxim Say electric cannon. Yes, it is the historical Maxim heavy machine gun, but this is a black powder version. Its caliber is 10.4mm, the same as the caliber of a rifle. Its rate of fire is 600 rounds per minute. Its effective range is 800 meters, and its total weight reaches 94 kilograms, including the gun mount and mantlet. As for why Howard called it the electric cannon, don't blame him for choosing the name randomly, because this thing has the same price as the artillery, and is even more expensive than ordinary artillery. In addition, it also looks a bit like artillery in appearance. This time, in order to increase the bargaining chip for the king people, Carlo put the newly developed Maxim machine gun on the battlefield. Electric cannon. Listening to Howard's introduction, Governor Zhang became interested. Open it and let me see. Following Governor Zhang's words, the Maxim machine gun appeared in front of everyone for the first time. However, the first appearance was not very good, because its compact size did not have the powerful image of an artillery at all. Governor Zhang also had this thought, and was even thinking in his heart, that the Italian people were bragging. Of course, Governor Zhang would not say this, and even praised him with some nice words. Howard was a businessman, and his most basic ability was to observe people's emotions. He immediately knew that the king people did not pay attention to this weapon, and he immediately had an idea. My lords, it's too late now. Why don't we go to the shooting range and try it out tomorrow? Okay, I'll just go take a look tomorrow. Needless to say, Howard wanted to test the quality of these weapons. He was not at ease if he handed it over directly to the frontline soldiers. After one night, a group of people appeared at the shooting range again, but this time Maxim's performance was an eye-opener for the king people. In order to have a more intuitive cash withdrawal, Howard purchased a batch of pigs and sheep overnight as experimental subjects. So when the pigs and sheep fell in pieces in front of Maxim's gun, one can imagine the expressions of Governor Zhang and others. Of course, the Italians' other weapons are also good. The artillery is very sharp, and the rifle is also good, but the ammunition is a little short. After the demonstration, Governor Zhang immediately decided to unload all 3,000 fast guns. After leaving 4 quick guns, he also allocated them all. As for the Maxim electric cannon, it was a little special, because no one was operating it. Get over this thing. Fortunately, Iran took this into consideration and specially equipped dozens of gunners. In the end, Governor Zhang thought about it, and decided that, after leaving 4 electric cannons and personnel behind, the other 8 electric cannons were removed. Among them, as the key point, to resist the French attack, Zinanguan received most of the ordnance, among which 6 Maxims were sent here. There are 2 chapters today. Leave your recommendation. Vote quickly. Chapter 86, Maxim's first experience, Part 2. Zinanguan Pass was built very early. The Han Dynasty established a pass here more than 2,000 years ago. It was first named Yangji Pass, and later renamed Jisha Pass, and Ananguan Pass. In the first year of Han Wu in the Ming Dynasty, 1368, in order to consolidate southern Xinjiang, it was rebuilt into a 2-story gatehouse. Later it was renamed Zenanguan. In the following years, Zenanguan Pass has always been the most important pass in Vietnam and Guangxi. But now there are only a bunch of ruins left in Zenanguan, because the French burned the pass after occupying it before. The King Army is now stationed in the pass area in front of the pass, and its commander is veteran General Feng Zike. As for this person's experience, there is no need to say much. He was born in Xiandahu, and engaged in anti-Qing dynasty. He was later ordered to peace, and participated in the suppression of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom movement. Later, he was promoted to the governor of Guangxi, and suppressed various anti-Qing movements. I just retired and returned to my hometown 2 years ago, preparing to spend my remaining years in peace. Later, because Zhenguoquan was transferred to Liangjiang, because Zhuo Zhangtang rushed to serve as governor of Fujian and Zhejiang, Zhang Shusheng, who was temporarily acting as governor of Guangdong and Guangxi, invited the veteran to come out again. Although Zhang Zedong later took over as the governor of Guangdong and Guangxi, he still trusted him. But speaking of it, Feng Zike was a little helpless when he led his troops to be stationed in the Zenanguan area, because he had many disputes with Pandingxin, the governor of Guangxi, mainly because the governor of Guangxi had different ideas from him. Master Pan kept asking the ministries not to fight at will. He regarded the French army as the army of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, and wanted to build a stronghold to fight the war. However, Feng Zike believes that today is different from the past. The French are much more powerful than those rebel bandits, and this kind of strategy will not work at all. So the two had a dispute. Pandingxin was a civil servant and a governor of a province. Feng Zike was originally an admiral of a province, but now he is still a veteran general who has returned to the army. Therefore, one can imagine the relationship between the other ministries and in. Fortunately, the new governor of Guangdong and Guangxi, Zhang Zedong, had great trust in him. No, less than half of the newly arrived Italian firearms were shipped to him. General Feng, here are 1,000 Italian fast guns, 8 fast cannons, 6 electric cannons, or 1,000 artillery shells, and 400,000 rounds of various bullets. This is a list. Please click on it. The officer in charge of the escort reported to Feng Zikai the weapons shipped from Guangzhou and presented a list. Thanks to my brother for bringing us the weapons. I feel a lot more at ease here because Feng Zikai was born in the Xiandahu before. He still has some habits that he has not changed to this day, such as calling his soldiers Erlang Point. However, this was not the main reason for Feng Zikai to talk to him. He pulled the official and glanced at Cossens and others standing nearby who were dressed similar to him, but their faces looked wrong. Brother, why are you bringing foreigners here? Facing Feng Zikai's inquiry, the official showed an enigmatic smile. These are the same Italians as on the second ship Zijing. They are here to help us, but it looks awkward to me. General Feng was obviously a little uncomfortable with the presence of Italians in his military camp. Old General, these people have been specially transferred here by Master Tay. Among other things, do you have any of you who know how to use the electric cannon? Moreover, with these people, you can have multiple helpers when using the fast cannon. The official's words made Feng Zikai feel much better, but he thought of a question and asked quickly, how do you say they are under my command? The official thought for a moment and said, that's right, but they are mainly responsible for operating the electric cannon. In addition, the master of the platform has issued a strict order prohibiting them from being used as infantry. It was obvious that Governor Zhang was also afraid that someone would use these foreign soldiers as consumables. Don't worry, how dare I, Old Feng, disobey Master Tay's orders. After sending the official from Guangzhou down, Feng Zikai recruited his eldest son, Rinking. Arrange these foreign soldiers so that no one notices them. Obviously, Feng Zikai is also a person who understands military affairs and intends to conceal the fact that he received a batch of ordnance. Father, leave this to me. Then, Feng Xiangrong, the eldest son, rushed over with several soldiers. All heroes, please follow me. Feng Xiangrong didn't know what to call him, so he simply called him a more quaint title. Of course, Cossens and others would definitely not be able to understand these words, not to mention Feng Xiangrong's thick Guangxi accent point. But it doesn't matter, isn't there a translator? Cossens and others immediately followed Feng Xiangrong's footsteps and were taken to a separate barracks area. During this period, Feng Xiangrong basically gave them the best treatment in the barracks. After settling the Italians, Feng Xiangrong returned to his father. Father, the arrangements for the foreign soldiers have been made. Facing his son's report, Feng Zikai retracted his gaze from the map. I understand. Rinking, father, is still worried about the French. When Feng Xiangrong saw that Feng Zikai was still looking at the map, he knew his father better than his son, and he immediately guessed what his father was thinking. How can we not worry about this? Facing his son, Feng Zikai expressed his thoughts without hesitation. Currently, the company has 3,000 troops in Langsun and Winyan, including 2,000 French soldiers and 1,000 Vietnamese auxiliary troops, complete with guns and artillery. On the other hand, we only have 5,000 troops at Zenan Pass, and among them can less than half of them use guns and artillery. Although we have geography, the disparity in strength is huge. Without troops, we have no chance of winning. A soldier must take risks, and taking risks is not a good idea when it comes to military affairs. Feng Zikai has been fighting for so many years. How could he not know the risks involved? Although there are guns and cannons sent by the manufacturer, they are still not as sharp as the guns and cannons of the company, so head-on confrontation is not within the scope of his consideration point. But now he had an idea, and he was going to use aggressive methods to lure the legal person to attack. For this reason, he was going to personally find out the legal person's background. Rinking, go and call Leoa. I have an idea. Okay, father, remember not to make any noise about this. Father, please rest assured, I'm not a 3-year-old boy. I know the severity. In the next 2 days, Feng Zikai did not move, but the 500 soldiers he brought from his hometown secretly prepared torches, kerosene and other items for night travel. On the third day, after talking with General Feng and his deputy Wang Xiaoqi, he secretly led his 2 sons and 500 soldiers from his hometown to Winyan. Taking advantage of the darkness, Feng Zike, led by the local Li people, came to the French camp. Then under his command, 500 soldiers broke into the French camp and shot and killed 32 Vietnamese servants and 3 French soldiers. He also set fire to the camp and burned 31 tents. The sudden attack by the King Army made the French commander Negri, then commander of the 2nd Brigade of the Beaky expedition, extremely angry. Then he decided to teach the King Army a profound lesson. To this end, he reported to his superior, Colonel Parley, and asked the colonel to allow him to conduct a raid on the King Army in the Xinanguan area. Due to the poor performance of the King Army before, Colonel Parley also agreed to his request and sent a battalion to support Negri in order to be foolproof. Negri, who had received support, collected supplies and waited for an ammunition supply before rushing to Xinanguan with 2,000 French soldiers and 1,000 Vietnamese servants. Because of Carlo's intervention, the deployment of troops at Xinanguan in the book is quite different from that in history. I hope you won't worry too much about it. Chapter 87, Maxim's First Experience, Part 2. There is a long wall at the pass in front of Zenon Pass. This wall is 7 feet high, 3 miles long, 1 foot wide at the bottom, and 3 miles long. It spans the east and west ridges, and a deep trench is dug outside the wall. This is the fortification that Feng Zike mobilized the people to repair after more than a month. It is also his biggest barrier against the French attack. The sun is scorching now, but there are heads standing behind the long wall. Feng Zike's 5,000 troops have gathered here because the French came to Xinanguan again, and this time there were more people than before. After Negri led the French army to dispatch troops from Winyuan and Langsun, Feng Zike received the news immediately. Although it was his plan to lure the snake out of its hole, when the French army actually came, he was not sure about it. Although he had tried the fast cannon sent by the Italians before, and the electric cannon operated by the Italians themselves, he was not sure whether this thing was reliable. I remember that when he saw the demonstration of the electric cannon named Maxim, his face changed. With many years of experience in the military, Feng Zike was keenly aware that the swarm-like group charges would be hard to come by in the future, and he had such an intention in his preparation plan. Immediately, he specifically asked the Italians whether this electric cannon was Attala's unique weapon. After receiving a positive answer, he felt relieved. Since the French don't have this thing, then my previous idea can still be realized. In order to facilitate his command, he ordered Wang Xiaoqi to guard the west ridge on the right, Chen Jia and Jiang Zhanghun to guard the east ridge on the left, and he and his 2 sons guarded the entrance of the valley. Facing the formation set up by Feng Zike, Negri, who led his army to the pass, didn't care at all. In his opinion, these king troops were a group of cowards. As long as he shelled them, they would scatter in all directions. Even if there are still a few stubborn people who refuse to retreat, the French warriors will use the guns in their hands to make them understand that they are simply irresistible. This is not the case in Africa, the Americas, and Asia. Even in Indochina, the French warriors are the same in this way. Although they also encountered some minor troubles, such as the Black Flag Army, these people could only display their bravery in small-scale battles. As long as the French soldiers reached more than 2 battalions, then such as the Black Flag Army, small characters can't resist France's footsteps. So, when he saw that the King Army actually wanted to block his footsteps with a long wall, Negri couldn't help laughing. Fortunately, no one asked him why the general was laughing. Since these reckless king people want to block France, let them taste the power of French cannons. Fire. After the artillery was ready, Negri immediately gave the order to fire, and let them have a taste of the shells. Boom, boom, boom. This time Negri brought a battalion of artillery, more than 30 artillery pieces of various types, roaring. The shells basically landed in front of the long wall and the King Army's position. Occasionally, some shells flew over the long wall and landed behind, but at this time, screams could be vaguely heard. Such shelling may have been effective against other King armies, but it was of no use to the King Army, commanded by Feng Zike. Of course, the French army is not the only one capable of this. As the artillery gradually became familiar with the terrain and ballistics, its artillery became more and more accurate. Especially at several checkpoints on the long wall, it was violently bombarded. Many the king's soldiers who failed to hide were hit by shrapnel. Some fell down without a sound, while others fell to the ground and screamed. The fierce shelling made the morale of the king army begin to fluctuate, and many people showed some fearful eyes. And was all this seen by Peng Gang? During the interval of the French shelling, he drew his saber and shouted loudly, "All officers and men, starting from me, no one is allowed to take a step back. Behind us is our hometown. Who wants his wife and children to be insulted by the French? Now anyone who dares to step back will be dealt with immediately. I have made arrangements before going to war. I have sent guards to guard the retreat. As long as there is no order from me, I will kill anyone who retreats without mercy." Peng Gang first started from a small point, moved him with emotion and reason, and then used military force to intimidate him, finally calming down the soldiers' minds. These soldiers are all from nearby state capitals. Of course, they don't want to see their hometowns suffer military disasters, especially the dirty things the French did in Vietnam. They don't want to see them in their hometowns. So after Peng Gang's instigation, their hearts gradually calmed down. Later, even if the French bombardment became more fierce, they gritted their teeth and persisted. The general's courage is absolutely correct. As long as the general is not afraid of danger, the soldiers will not be afraid. The French bombardment did not last long. After about 2 sticks of incense, the bombardment stopped. This is not because the French army feels that the artillery fire is about the same, but that the artillery needs to cool down. Negri took advantage of this moment and waved his hand, and 500 Vietnamese servants immediately moved towards the long wall. This was to test the strength of the king army guarding the pass. How could Peng Gang not know the tricks of the French army? There was no need to use fast guns. When these Vietnamese servants came to the trench, figures immediately emerged from behind the long wall. A burst of bows and arrows and gunfire made these servants cry. The mother crawled back. Inside the wall, the king army deliberately raised the foundation so that they could shoot with only their chest exposed. Seeing that the servant army behaved so badly, Negri was so angry that he wanted to enforce military law on them. However, it is easy to enforce military law, but it is a bit difficult to recruit servants to join the army, so Negri held back. Although these people are not good at combat, they can help the French army a lot in other aspects. Keep firing. As the artillery cooled down, a new round of shelling began again. After repelling the attack of the servant army, the king army immediately descended from the wall. Who could wait for the French to bomb it? So the king army hid behind the long wall and injured the French artillery fire. The bombardment ended the test, and after being beaten back, the bombardment continued. After several times in a row, Negri no longer planned to use these servants, and a battalion of French troops formed a skirmish line and moved towards the long wall. The sharp-eyed eldest son Peng Gang immediately suggested to his father Peng Gang, "Father, now the French have sent out their own soldiers. Fire. There's no rush. Let's wait out the French's energy first." Peng Gang, who has been in the army for many years, will not use his own foreign guns and cannons at this time. Besides, his numbers are not as good as those of the opponent. As long as he shows them now, the enemy will immediately retreat, and the effect of surprise will not be achieved. Of course, if you want to paralyze the enemy, you need to sacrifice human lives. General Peng knows this very well, but if you want to win, how can it be possible without adding some human lives? When necessary, he and his sons will do it together, and the old general will not blink an eye. Take a look. So just like before, when these French troops did not touch the long wall, the king troops remained motionless. Of course, these French officers and soldiers already knew the king army's fighting style, so the closer they got to the long wall, the more cautious they became. Seeing the French army entering the shooting range, there was a shout from the high wall, and countless king troops emerged. They held bows, arrows, and guns and fired at the incoming French army. However, this time was different from before. The French officers and soldiers were well prepared and immediately responded with rifles in their hands. After all, the breech-loading guns were more powerful. After a burst of shooting, the French army suffered few casualties, but a large number of king troops behind the wall fell. Farther seeing a large area of his own soldiers falling on the wall, Feng Xiangrang was about to speak again. As a result, Feng Zikai waved his hand to stop him, and the old general continued to give orders. Let the 2 battalion leaders Kui and Shan prepare. I will immediately change them upon my order, and continue to shoot at the French. After a touching exchange of shots, Feng Zikai gave an order, and the king troops from the Kui and Shan battalions immediately replaced the defenders as new troops appeared behind the wall. The casualties of the attacking French army also increased. After the two sides fought like this for nearly an hour, Negri finally couldn't bear it anymore, and sent a battalion of reinforcement. The number of attacking French troops now reached more than 700. Not enough. Looking at the number of people attacking the French army, Feng Zikai muttered, and then he ordered 2 more battalion heads to continue to lure the French army to attack. The two armies fought fiercely across long walls and trenches. Whooshin! Arrow was deeply embedded in the chest of a French soldier who was about to shoot. The French soldier screamed and fell to the ground. The king soldier who shot the bow and arrow didn't have time to be happy. His half-exposed body was hit by several bullets, and his body fell down. As soon as he went soft point also behind the wall, 2 soldiers carrying guns were about to open fire at the French troops outside. However, they were targeted by French soldiers who had already spotted them. After a burst of gunfire, the 2 soldiers disappeared with their guns sound point. Generally speaking, the French army had the advantage in this battle, and the advantage of rear-mounted guns was clearly demonstrated. The French soldiers each looked for bunkers, lying down or squatting in various postures, to minimize their exposed bodies. Although the king army could block most of their bodies, the weapons in their hands were either bows and arrows or rifles, and even fewer front-loading guns, so they were destined to suffer a big loss. After an hour of fierce fighting, the king army behind the defensive wall was exhausted and showed signs of wavering. As a veteran, Feng Zikai couldn't help but notice, so he immediately recruited his eldest son Feng Xiangrang. Rinking, you lead the 1st battalion of the left team, and provide reinforcement immediately. The most elite one in Feng Zikai's hands is the left and right battalions, led by his 2 sons Feng Xiangrang and Feng Xianghe respectively. What these 2 battalions had in hand was 1,000 Italian rifles sent by Zhang Zedong. This was a treatment that even 500 hometown soldiers did not receive. Since you are using a quick gun, you need to use it on the edge. Now Feng Zikai thinks it is time point. After receiving his father's order, Feng Xiangrang didn't say much, and immediately rushed to the rear, and waved to the resting battalion of the left army. My sons, follow me and kill the enemy. The battle situation immediately changed with the addition of the 1st battalion of the left team. After all, everyone now uses fast guns. Although there are certain differences in performance, there is no generation difference, so the casualties of the attacking French soldiers begin to increase. Faced with the sudden appearance of the defenders operating breech-loading guns, Negri saw everything. He breathed a sigh of relief and finally waited for the elite troops of the defenders. According to his understanding, when fighting the king army, there will always be such an elite force, either to fight at critical moments or to cover the commander's retreat. Based on the current situation, it is obvious that the garrison commander used it for defensive operations. Today's 2 chapters, you must leave a recommendation vote. Chapter 88 Maxim's first experience, end. Now that the garrison commander had shown his trump card, Negri no longer hesitated. The French artillery would let him know what infantry and artillery warfare was. Let the frontline troops pay attention to the distance from the position, and let the artillery suppress the opponent immediately. Following Negri's order, the artillery fired again. It has to be said that France's artillery is excellent enough, and it deserves to be a country that has always attached great importance to artillery construction. Their artillery basically controlled the impact point of the artillery shells within 50 meters of the long wall. Such precise artillery fire caused a lot of losses to the 1st battalion of the left army behind the wall. Even Feng Xiangrang, who commanded them, had a tattoo on his forehead. Hold on and fight to the death. The eldest son of General Feng had a ferocious look on his face, as if he was trying to choose someone to devour, as blood was pouring out of his forehead. Since his own commander was unwilling to retreat, what could the other soldiers say? They could only grit their teeth and persist. However, it is unclear how long this attitude can last. Feng Xianghua, who was worried about his brother, couldn't help but said, "Father, please send more reinforcement." "No, it's not time yet." The second son's request was flatly rejected by Feng Zikai, who believed that it was not the right time yet. So when will the time be right? In Feng Zikai's view, the best time was when the left battalion was defeated. When the French thought that the defenders at the checkpoint were defeated, it was the time to relax, and a violent blow would be the most fatal. In order to get such a good opportunity, he not only used his life to paralyze the enemy, but even his own son had to bear the risks on the battlefield point. Since there were no reinforcement, the 1st Battalion of the Left Army, which relied entirely on words, continued to resist for half an hour, but suffered too many casualties, and was finally defeated. Seeing the enemy's retreat, the French officers and soldiers cheered sincerely. This battle was too difficult, but in the end they won. As a qualified commander, after seeing the enemy's retreat, Negri certainly knew what needed to be done, and immediately issued the order. The whole army goes out and pursues the enemy, following Negri's order. Other French soldiers who had been waiting for a long time immediately joined the attack sequence. Even the Vietnamese servants with low morale roared and happily began to chase the fleeing enemies. It's just that they don't have clairvoyance and can't see clearly what's going on behind the wall. The retreating soldiers were stopped, and Commander Feng Zikai led all the other King troops to press forward. What's even more terrible is that on the east and west sides, the Maxim heavy machine guns were pushed up by Cossens and others. Cossens witnessed the entire battle before, and he had to give a thumbs up to General Feng's strategy. Although many of the troops under his command were still using cold weapons that should have been eliminated long ago, his excellent command, causing the French army to step into a trap unknowingly. When the large group of French officers and soldiers had already arrived less than 200 meters in front of the checkpoint, some French soldiers even had their hands on the long wall. At this time, the sound of artillery suddenly sounded, which seemed to be a signal. Countless figures poured out from behind the long wall. Among them, General Feng drew his saber and was the first to rush towards the French army. Seeing Feng Zikai, the commander-in-chief, taking the lead, other King officers and soldiers were not willing to lag behind. But they soon discovered that compared to their own bravery, the Maxim electric cannons from both wings were more ruthless. Thud, tug, tug. The Maxim machine guns placed on both wings demonstrated for the first time their ability to harvest lives. Thousands of French soldiers' lives were ruthlessly harvested by it. 6 Maxim machine guns sprayed ammunition at the French soldiers and soldiers at a speed of 500 rounds per minute. At the same time, the artillery that had been hidden for a long time fired at a rate of 3 rounds per minute. Shells were fired at the French artillery positions. Although only 8 newly arrived Italian fast guns were able to hit the French artillery positions, they still caused huge irreparable losses. Boom. An artillery piece on the position was directly hit, and it blew up into the sky with the French artillery on the side. Boom, boom, boom. A shell hit the ammunition box, and the continuous explosions made the surrounding area a restricted area for life. The carelessness and lack of intelligence caused the French artillery position to be only 3,500 meters away from the checkpoint, which was exactly within the range of the Italian 85mm artillery. The bombardment made it impossible for the French artillery position to respond. This is also let the Maxim machine gun exert its maximum power unscrupulously. Retreat. Quickly. Negri, standing in front of the position, reacted immediately after seeing his soldiers being ruthlessly harvested, but since he was here, there was no need to retreat. Not to mention the French troops who had already rushed to the long wall. These people were destined to be overwhelmed by the King army, and either died in battle or were captured. The large French army that rushed to the pass was already 200 to 300 meters away from the long wall. They wanted to retreat to a safe distance. How could they escape without risking lives and walking a bloody road? And at this time, you must move quickly, faster than your teammates. So now the French officers and soldiers no longer care about military discipline, and it is polite to bump into their comrades. Some even directly kicked their comrades down in an attempt to use them to attract the King troops behind them. Focus and buy yourself time to escape. All the ugly behaviors of the French army were exposed in front of the King army, which boosted their morale even more. Everyone knew that they had won, and it was a big victory, so they pursued harder. However, as the commander-in-chief, Peng Gang was not dazzled by the victory. He still led his army to follow the French army, because the commander of Maxim's electric cannon kept telling him that at a distance of 600 meters, his army had better keep a distance from the French army. As long as he heard the electric cannon cease fire, he could rush forward. In fact, they didn't need to be so serious at all, because at this time, the morale of the French army was on the verge of collapse, and less than 600 French soldiers escaped from Maxim's range. The whole road was full of fallen corpses of French soldiers, which was simply too horrible to look at. These French troops, who were like frightened birds, did not stop for a moment when they saw the king troops pursuing them behind them. Many of them were already running empty-handed towards the way they came. Faced with this situation, Peng Gang left some officers and soldiers to clean the battlefield and pick up some debris. In particular, all the cannons that were still intact on the French position had to be taken away. As for the other officers and soldiers, they followed him and followed the defeated French army towards Langsun. In this battle before Zinangun, the King army invested more than 5,000 men from Peng Gang's troops, while the French army invested 3,000 men. In the end, the French army was defeated miserably, with more than 2,300 casualties and more than 300 prisoners. Those who were injured and captured were mainly French officers and soldiers, while the Vietnamese servants were all captured without injuries, and only more than 500 people were captured. He followed Negri and fled back to Langsun. Most of these people were empty-handed, but Negri did not dare to stay in Langsun. After spending a night gathering the soldiers, he immediately withdrew from Langsun with more than 1,000 defeated soldiers and continued to flee to Bac Ninh. He didn't have time to collect many supplies in the city, so he ran away in despair. Facts proved that Negri was good at running away. The next day, Peng Gang led his troops to Langsun and regained the city. Then Peng Gang attacked from all sides and successively recaptured Changqing, Haiyang, Taoyuan and other places. With Peng Gang's victory at Zinangun, other king troops were ready to move. Moreover, the Vietnamese people also rioted one after another. For a time, the Beaky area fell into a situation of smoke and smoke. This gave French Commander Miller an unusual headache. For this reason, he could only carry out strategic contraction. A large number of newly occupied cities were abandoned in this way, which made the resistance of the Vietnamese people even more vigorous. For this reason, he specially sent a message to Paris, requesting domestic reinforcement to be sent for support. In addition, after investigating the fiasco at Zinangun, he even suggested to Paris that the Italians had intervened too much in this war with the Qing dynasty. If the Italian black hands behind them could not be blocked, France would soon be in trouble in this war. It's hard to get a good result. Let's send it like this. If we continue writing, we will touch on all aspects of the country. It is completely thankless. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89, Peace between China and France. General Miller did not know that his telegram caused an uproar in France. Regarding the defeat of the French army in the Far East, the country first felt unbelievable. You must know that this is not a battle of hundreds of people. It is understandable to lose in a small-scale battle, because small-scale means weak strength. If there is an unexpected situation or a large-scale enemy attack, failure is inevitable. What Negri commanded was the strength of a fully equipped regiment. Its equipment and number of soldiers were almost the same as that of a regiment. Moreover, the size of the opponent did not reach a crushing scale, only more than 6,000 people. General Miller report that the domestic art has been slightly processed. Negri's opponent. Moreover, the equipment of these king people was far inferior to that of France, and they actually lost a disastrous defeat. I heard that even the cannons were taken away by the king people. Moreover, this defeat was the most disastrous defeat that France suffered after the Franco-Prussian War, and someone must be responsible for it. Needless to say, Lieutenant Colonel Negri should bear his own responsibility. As for whether he will go to a military court, it depends on what the military thinks. However, no matter what the outcome is, this person's outcome will definitely not be much better. Being ordered to retire is the best outcome. After all, he inflicted France with the worst losses since the Franco-Prussian War, and he deserved this result. Point of course, just dealing with Lieutenant Colonel Negri is not the end. No other responsible person can escape. However, as Prime Minister João Ferry, who initiated the war, he has a great responsibility. For this reason, some members of parliament have joined forces to prepare to remove the French Prime Minister Faure, who is in his second term. This news is simply a devastating blow. Of course, this was also due to his bad luck. The exploration of the Congo River and Niger River basins did not bring much benefit to France, but the cost was not small at all. In addition, in this Sino-French war, France has spent 471 million francs, but after suffering a disastrous defeat at Zenangon, it saw no benefits at all. Affected by the patrol of 2 Venice-class ships, the lone French fleet was not able to block shipping from the southeastern provinces, so the economic losses were not large. Since the King Court's economic losses were not large, France had no intention of making excess of demands promise, since the goal has not been achieved, and there is still no hope. Then as the person responsible for launching the war, ruefully must pay the price. Facing the angry parliament, the famous French Prime Minister could only retain his last dignity, and chose to resign. So on October 19, 1884, Rouffry, unable to withstand the pressure, announced his resignation, and his cabinet government collapsed. After Joffeli resigned, Parliament quickly elected Henri Brisson as France's new prime minister. The first thing the new prime minister did after taking office was to stop the Sino-French war that wasted money and people. Of course, France's pride and status still need to be maintained, so the French government does not intend to make many concessions to the Qing dynasty. In order to prevent the Chinese from misunderstanding the situation, the parliament has also allocated 80 million francs to strengthen its troops in North Vietnam. Of course, the French have not forgotten that another figure appeared in this war. For this reason, His Excellency Goodwin, the French ambassador to Italy, once again visited Carlo at the palace. However, compared to the harsh words last time, Lord Goodwin's attitude was much better this time. His Majesty King Carlo, our country hopes that your country can observe neutrality and suspend arms transactions with the Qing dynasty. It is obvious that the French are well aware of Italy's export of weapons. Especially after the fiasco at Zenangon, the French decided to regard Italy as the mastermind behind the scenes. To be able to speak so politely is because France is eager to get out of this quagmire war. Otherwise the ambassador's words would be even more unpleasant. Your Excellency Ambassador, our country has always respected the law of neutrality. Our country does not have arms trade with the Qing dynasty. Although he said such shameless words, Carlo was not ashamed at all, and even felt a little secretly happy, telling you French people to ignore Italy. Now he can be said to be very proud of himself, because France's defeat in the Sino-French War has further proved that he, the young king, has farsightedness. Although it is still too early to draw conclusions, many ministers have already secretly sent messages to express their goodwill to him. It can be said that with the good performance of the Qing dynasty in the war, Carlo's power became more and more important. Although he was not yet able to compete with the prime minister, the gap between the two was closing at the speed of the naked eye. Faced with Carlo's denial, Ambassador Goodwin dared not speak out. Everyone knows what happened to the Qing patrol ships and the Italian weapons that appeared on the battlefield, but in order to complete the mission assigned by Paris, Ambassador Goodwin had to change his story. Your Majesty, I misremembered this, but our country hopes that your country can abide by the law of neutrality. It seems that Ambassador Goodwin's memory is not very good. You should be more serious next time. Carlo mocked the French ambassador in front of him. Faced with Carlo's sarcasm, Ambassador Goodwin's expression remained unchanged, and he still smiled, as if Carlo was talking about someone else. This is an excellent envoy to a foreign country. Carlo secretly praised him. Of course, praise deserves praise, and Carlo did not forget the purpose of the French ambassador's visit. Ambassador Goodwin, please rest assured that our country will strictly abide by the law of neutrality. This is not because Carlo has given up, but that he has achieved his goal. Therefore, He did not continue to fight with the French, which would not be worth it if he offended his irritable neighbors. Although the relationship between Italy and France is not good now, there is no need to be mortal enemies. Besides, Italy is not equipped to play this role now. Moreover, Italy has shown enough sincerity in front of the king people. Carlo also knew this idiom, too much, and it would not be good if the king people thought too much. After receiving Carlo's affirmative reply from Italy, the French now planned to negotiate with the king people who had cut off foreign aid. In fact, only the majority of people in the Qing dynasty were also interested in peace talks, so the two parties finally sat down together for peace talks with the help of the Customs and Excise Department. Before that, in order to show its sincerity in the armistice, the Qing dynasty ordered the North Vietnamese garrison to withdraw back to the country in stages. Among them, General Feng, who had made great achievements in battle, wrote several times to ask for war, striving to capture Hanoi. At this time, Feng Zikei's army had grown from more than 3,000 people after the victory of Xinanguan past to nearly 20,000 words, the largest part of which was written by him. During the war in Vietnam, local people came to vote. They hoped that this old general who had achieved great victories would be able to drive the French invaders from their homeland. But their hopes were dimmed, because the Qing government only wanted to ensure the security of the southwest frontier, and had no intention of retaining Vietnam as a vassal state. In the final analysis, the Qing dynasty still lacked confidence and strength. Especially after the victory at Xinanguan, the attitudes of the great powers towards this war were rapidly changing. In the past, they were happy to see a war between China and France, and their attitude can be seen from the fact that the ZHI and Jing ships used the British colonial dock for maintenance on their way back to China. However, after 2 consecutive major victories at sea and land, his attitude changed fundamentally. He no longer secretly supported the Qing dynasty. Instead, he not only stopped all kinds of secret help, but even publicly stated that the Qing dynasty should withdraw from Vietnam. Therefore, under internal and external pressure, the Qing dynasty also had an active interest in peace talks. Both sides want to stop the war, so it's easy to negotiate. Especially after France no longer insisted on asking the king to pay compensation and extended its tentacles of power to the southwest. The speed of negotiations became even faster. On December 24, 1884, Li Hongzhang and Minister Badenoch in China began negotiations on a formal treaty between China and France in Xianjin. On February 1, 1885. The two countries formally signed the Vietnam Treaty between China and France in Xianjin. Different from history, although the Qing dynasty recognized France's annexation of Vietnam, it did not open the ports. France's goods tariffs remained unchanged, and it did not open up the right to build roads. After all, it was not defeated without defeat. Now that the war is over, it is necessary to reward according to merit. Among them, General Feng, who has made great achievements in battle, was awarded the title of Prince Xiaobao, and his rank was changed to second-class light vehicle captain, and he will also handle Guangxi military affairs. Next is Liu Bukhan. This young man, who nominally commanded the naval battle in the South China Sea, was awarded the second rank, and his acting rank was also corrected. Other meritorious soldiers and officials were awarded. As for the navy and army officers and soldiers sent by Italy, the Qing government did not dare to publicize them, so they only gave them some medals and silver awards. However, Italy was not at a loss. In addition to the money for the purchase of ordnance and other weapons, the Qing court also had a generous gift. The Sino-French War has basically come to an end. Today, the steamed buns are not in good condition. There is only one chapter. Don't be surprised. Chapter 90: Huge Rewards. I really didn't expect that Lifa and the others actually went to North Korea. Carlo was looking at a telegram, which Lifa and others had just sent, after completing a mission. In this telegram, Lifa introduced the anti-China civil strife in North Korea, and they sailed the ZHI and Jing-2 warships and other warships purchased by the Qing government to Busan to deter the Japanese who were causing trouble behind the scenes, and the effect was pretty good. After the Japanese saw that the ZHI and Jing ships actually appeared in Busan, they immediately stopped. Because his fleet was tied together, and it was not enough for these two ships to patrol. The 2 Venice-class ships can be used as armored ships in front of the Japanese fleet. Moreover, in this telegram, Yuan Xiangcheng's name appeared in Carlo's eyes for the first time. The young man who put down the Shenjiaku showed his ability for the first time. However, the current Yuan Xiangcheng is not worthy of his attention. He is still paying attention to Li Zongtang, Zhang Nanpi and others, because these governors are in charge of local power, and Carlo did not let Italy participate in this Sino-French war, just for that point money for arms, but it's not bad. Howard, a white glove, has brought a lot of business to Italy. Carlo put down the telegram jointly sent by Leifer and others, picked up the telegram sent by the businessman, and looked at the king's return with satisfaction. This is a purchase list, which records in detail the materials purchased by various provinces of the Qing dynasty, mainly various machines. Among them, machines for weaving, printing, and dyeing accounted for the majority, and there were also a lot of various equipment for shipbuilding. The total value of this list is as high as 110 million lire, and the return is quite generous. This can also be seen from the Qing dynasty's rich financial resources. Hundreds of years of trade surplus have accumulated enough wealth for it. This list could be sent back immediately after the end of the Sino-French War. Needless to say, the people who played a driving role in it knew that this was also closely related to Italy's lowest selling price among various machines as far as looms are concerned. The quality of textile looms in the Far East countries is currently the highest in the United Kingdom, followed by France, then Germany, Austria, Belgium, and Italy. Of course, the price is also arranged in the same way. This time, in order to open up the Qing market, the various machines on the price list carried by Howard were generally 20% lower than those in DRB and other countries. Such a selling price was very tempting for the Qing dynasty, which was eager to develop its own industry. So while the Qing dynasty was most favorable to Italy, Mr. Howard traveled to all the southeastern provinces. These lists are the results of its running. Facing the results of Howard's run, Carlo certainly paid attention to it. This was a good opportunity to open up the Qing country market. In addition, this order can be regarded as a big gain for Italy's domestic manufacturing industry. To alleviate their dilemma of being suppressed by German products, and Carlo was more nervous than anyone else about this order, because this is related to whether Italian products can sell well in the Far East. In terms of quality, Italy cannot currently catch up with Britain and France, let alone Germany and Austria. But when it comes to service, Carlo still has some ideas thanks to the praise of Huawei from the network in his previous life. Carlo had a very good understanding of the company's early development in his previous life. At that time, Huawei's products were not as good as foreign products of the same type, and it relied on services to open up the situation. If nothing else, Carlo can still imitate cats and tigers. Think of this. Carlo called the captain of the guard, Filmic, "Your Majesty, what are your orders?" This is the purchase list from the Far East. You should immediately summon all the manufacturers and ask them to deliver goods to customers in the Far East in accordance with my requirements. The captain of the guard took the list from Carlo and was surprised at the amount of the order. "Your Majesty, please don't worry, I will take care of it right away." What does Carlo want? It's very simple. That is, each manufacturer lists its easily damaged parts and sends more of these easily damaged parts when shipping. In addition, as long as each manufacturer receives an order, it must send maintenance personnel to be stationed in the Far East, ready to provide maintenance for those machines at any time. It sounds like this is very troublesome, and it is also increasing the expenditures of various manufacturers. But only Carlo knows that at present, when Italian products are not as good as similar products, they can only provide services. As for whether these manufacturers are willing or not, there is no need to worry. Before the outbreak of the war, Carlo had already begun preparations. He specially selected those manufacturers with good technology, but difficult operations to negotiate an agreement with them. The rules of the agreement were basically the Italian version of Carlo's previous life combined with actual conditions for this agreement with various rules. These manufacturers who were in difficulty had no right to refuse, so they naturally agreed. However, when it comes to sending personnel to the Far East, these shrewd businessmen already have a way to deal with it. Of course, I won't talk about large orders. For small orders, Several manufacturers will basically share one quota to save costs. Therefore, this order will not only help Italy's manufacturing industry, but also help Carlo control domestic capital. It can be said that it serves multiple purposes. That's why Carlo attached so much importance to it, not only to expand his power, but also to use these orders to win over capitalists. But this needs to be based on the governors of the Far East having a good impression of Italy. But when it comes to favorable impressions, Li Zhongtang is currently very interested in Italy. To be more precise, he was full of interest in the Italian Navy. Not to mention the performance of the ZHI and Jing ships in the naval battle this time. It can be described as wonderful. In addition, the Italian officers and soldiers operating the warships also received unanimous recognition. For this reason, Liu Buchan also specifically reported to Li Zhongtang, believing that the future naval officers and soldiers of Biang could go to Italy to see the world. Liu Buchan's words gave Li Zhongtang another layer of meaning. For this reason, he specially summoned his chief confidant Zhao Fu to discuss his thoughts. Shan, what do you think about recruiting another instructor for the Navy? In the study room, Li Zhongtang spoke to Zhao Fu next to him and expressed his thoughts. In fact, there are already many teachers in the Biang Navy currently being prepared, and they come from all over the world, and they are mainly British. If he really wanted to recruit a teacher, Li Zhongtang would not as a confidant. Zhao Fu certainly knew what Zhongtang meant. Does the Central Hall want to divide the power of the British? Faced with Zhao Fu's temptation, Li Zhongtang did not deny it at all. The British have too much power on the ship, which is not conducive to the construction of the Navy. I have learned a lot from my practice. Maybe I can invite someone to weigh in. That's right. Li Zhongtang just wanted to weigh the power of the British in the Navy that was being built. At present, there are more than 30 various training consultants in the Navy under preparation in the UK, and there are only more than 10 consultants from other countries combined. This can't help but make Li Zhongtang a little embarrassed. Moreover, Lang Weili was strongly recommended by Heard from the General Administration of Customs. Heard was overly concerned about the Navy, which forced Li Zhongtang to have more thoughts. So taking this opportunity, Li Zhongtang wanted to test Italy's attitude. Of course, he had no intention of replacing Lang Weili, and it would be good to have a backup to avoid the Navy being restricted by the British. Faced with Li Zhongtang's thoughts, Zhao Fu thought for a while and then spoke. Be prepared for any danger and be foresighted. Well, Yashin, you have learned how to speak in an official manner, and you can pat your beard and walk away. Leave a recommendation vote. Otherwise the second chapter will be difficult to deliver. Chapter 91 Berlin Conference. When the telegram that Biang wanted to find an Italian naval officer to be his instructor was handed to Carlo's desk, Carlo himself did not expect that Li Zhongtang actually wanted to be tutored in Italy. I don't know whether it was because of too much help that Li Zhongtang had a good impression of Italy, or whether it was the ability of the Italian Navy that convinced Li Zhongtang that he actually asked Italy to teach him. But Carlo himself estimated that it might be both. Faced with Li Zhongtang's request, Carlo still needed to ask the Navy Department before he could give an answer. After all, the Navy still needed manpower. Your Majesty, of course I have to agree to such a good opportunity. They called Admiral Gorek, but unexpectedly, as soon as Carlo said it, the Navy Minister couldn't wait to agree. This made Carlo very embarrassed. The general was not reserved at all. We can't blame Admiral Gorek for not being reserved. Every naval power is very happy to serve as an advisor to other navies. That is to say, the strength of the Italian Navy is not obvious, and this is the first opportunity to become a consultant. If you don't agree quickly, what are you waiting for? I haven't seen that the British Navy has naval advisors in many countries. It is simply a shame. And there is no fear of teaching apprentices to starve their masters to death, because the British Empire's Navy is the best in the world. This is also recognized by the world. Even the German High Seas Fleet, which will compete with Britain in the future, has never thought about overturning Britain's position. It is just to protect itself. Therefore, for the Italian Navy, participating in the construction of the King Navy is simply a dream. The benefits are very considerable. If nothing else, let's just say that warships need bases, so they need maintenance docks, berthing docks, cranes for lifting heavy objects, rail cars, etc., all of which are needed. Many of these things are not available in the Qing dynasty, so do you need to consider purchasing them abroad? At this time, if the consultant asks which one is better, doesn't that mean there is business? Of course, this is just a small profit. There are more to it. But for Carlo, the idea of the navy is all that matters. However, he also wanted to ask if there was a suitable candidate for the Lord Admiralty. Your navy needs to think carefully about the candidates sent to the Qing dynasty. Okay, your majesty, after the admiralty has researched the candidate, I will definitely show it to your majesty. It was obvious that Admiral Gorek understood what Carlo said. After sending the admiral away, Carlo picked up another telegram. This telegram was sent from Berlin. The Berlin Conference is currently being held, with a total of 15 countries participating. The conference is nominally to solve the issue of ownership of the Congo River Basin, but in fact it is discussing more about the division of power in Africa. Italy also sent a delegation headed by Foreign Minister Bacona, and this telegram was sent back to the country by the Foreign Minister. In fact, when it comes to the division of Africa this time, the Italian government is very interested, but Carlo, as the king, does not have much interest. This is not because Carlo does not know the importance of Africa, but that the places with oil and water are basically divided up by various countries. Although the Congo River Basin has huge opportunities, there is no chance for Italy at all. Although the Belgians got a big deal, Carlo didn't want to do it at all. Because for the current Italy, the market is the key, and developing the domestic economy is much more important than seizing colonies. In addition, Germany, France, Britain and other countries can accept a weak Belgium, but they will never accept Italy's intervention in the Congo River Basin. Although Italy is the weakest, it is also a strong power. Otherwise, why would Britain, France, and Germany withdraw from part of their territory and give it to Belgium? King Leopold of Belgium also took advantage of this and proposed that companies from various countries could develop in the Congo River Basin, which would be temporarily governed by Belgium. It is precisely because of this that the Belgians got a very big piece of the cake. In addition, developing colonies requires huge costs and must endure years of losses, which Italy's current finances do not have. In this era, Africa can only serve as a raw material base, and its market is extremely small. How many industrial products can you expect Uncle Black to buy? It was not until the end of the 20th century that the African market was gradually developed, and its scale was still not comparable to that of Asia, America, and Europe. Not to mention anything else. Africa's harsh climate and various diseases caused huge losses to the colonizing countries. For Italy, North Africa is the focus of its attention, because it is close to the country, which is very conducive to colonization and alleviating the pressure on the domestic population. It's just that North Africa has been robbed by Britain and France. Only the Ottoman Empire still had a territory in Libya, but it was basically desert, with only some Arab herdsmen grazing here. Since it was too barren and the Ottoman Empire was behind it, Italy did not attack it. As for other places, Carlo believes that Italy currently does not have the energy to take care of it, and it is the last word to give priority to the development of industry. If you don't have strong fists and don't dare to speak loudly, how can you snatch benefits? However, I did not expect that His Excellency Bacona had a good negotiation at the Berlin Conference, and Italy also captured Somalia in East Africa. I don't know if it was affected by the butterfly effect, but Britain did not insist on its colonial stronghold in Berbera, Somalia, but used this stronghold to reach an agreement with Italy. Italy gave up its colonial stronghold in Hodeidah, Yemen, in exchange for the British stronghold of Berbera in Somalia. Of course, in addition to this, Italy also signed with the United Kingdom their respective spheres of influence in the Red Sea. It can be said that Italy currently has only one achievement in Africa, Somalia. And Carlo felt a toothache when he saw the telegram sent back by the Foreign Secretary like a treasure. Italy really went to pick up some remote areas. It would be great if Sudan was a colony of Italy. He would no longer have to worry about Italy's small land and large population. However, this can only be Carlo's wish. The British will exchange Sudan to Italy if they are crazy. No amount of money is possible. This is related to their core interests in Africa. The Berlin Conference to carve up Africa is still going on this time, but according to news analysis, the results are similar to those in the previous life. It would be great if a conference could be held to carve up Asia. Compared to Africa, Asia has everything, and the market is also very leveraged. I say all that needs to be said. Africa is really not a good time for Italy to get involved right now. When various countries have initially developed, World War I just happened to break out. Wouldn't it be nice to accept other people's mature colonies? Chapter 92 Venice upgraded. The Navy Department came up with candidates within a few days, and Colonel Antonio from the Naval Training Department became the candidate selected by Admiral Gorak. Not to mention, Captain Antonio has very rich qualifications. He was born in a sailing family in Genoa. He joined the Navy of the Kingdom of Sardinia at the age of 18. Later, he served as the first mate of the cruiser Carrie in the Battle of Sally and performed well. Later, he was transferred to the reserve fleet and underwent 8 years of recruit training. When Admiral Garlock was serving as Lord of the Navy, he was transferred to the training division and became the deputy director in charge of training. It can be said that he has enough training for new recruits. It was also one of the reasons why Admiral Garlock chose him. Of course, this alone was not enough to make him stand out. Another advantage of Colonel Antonio is that he is not tough and tactful, but he is able to listen to other people's opinions. Although this personality prevents him from becoming a squadron commander, it is just right for him as an advisor. That's why Admiral Gorak chose him and presented him to Carlo. Your Majesty, General, you are attentive. After Carlo read Colonel Antonio's resume, he raised his head and praised the Navy Minister. Because Carlo learned that Langwili, the general advisor of the Biang fleet currently under preparation, was a stubborn man. Although he was extremely responsible for his work, the officers and soldiers of the Biang Navy suffered terribly under his training. However, in view of Li Zhangtang's appreciation for him, the officers and soldiers of the Biang Navy could only dare to be angry, but dare not speak out. Therefore, when Italy dispatches consultants, they must be distinguished from Langwili. In addition, considering the attitude of the United Kingdom, they cannot be higher in rank than Langwili, the general advisor. Langwili is also a colonel. They are all serving the interests of the kingdom, and there is no hard work at all. It was obvious that Admiral Garlock, who was the Minister of the Navy, also knew this very well, so he chose Antonio. After all, Italy's interests in the Far East were growing rapidly and someone was needed to maintain such growth. In addition to selecting candidates to serve as Biang advisors, Carlo also has one more thing to discuss with Admiral Gorak. Your Excellency, Admiral Leifer and others have made great contributions in this naval battle. How does the Navy intend to treat these heroes? Of course, there was a reason why Carlo was so interested in asking. Quite simply, Carlo wanted to support people he could trust in the Navy, so that he could control the Navy. And it was Leifer and Gomes, two young talents, who caught his eye. As for why he didn't choose someone else, there are a lot of captains and even generals in the Navy who want to be Carlos Spokesperson in the Navy, because Carlo is not willing to choose at will. In addition, he is still young and has plenty of time to slowly take control of the Navy. Admiral Gorak did not know what Carlo was thinking. He thought that Carlo was eager to reward meritorious officials, to show that he had won a complete victory in this confrontation with the Prime Minister. However, even if he knew about it, it would not have any impact on him. By the time these two good seedlings can influence the Navy, he will either be buried or have retired long ago. Your Majesty, what our Navy Ministry wants is to promote all the officers and soldiers who fought in the Far East this time to one level and record their merits on their resumes. Originally, we planned to wait for them to come back before promoting them, but since your Majesty has already asked, then let him be promoted in the Far East. Carlo was very satisfied with Admiral Gorak's words, because the reward originally given by the Admiralty was good, and the Admiral took care of his emotions, and advanced the time by more than half a year. Leifer, Gomes and others still cannot return to China because they need to spend more than half a year teaching the officers and soldiers of the Biang Navy to operate these two patrol ships. This was Li Zhangtang's special request to Italy. For this reason, a textile machine worth 2 million lire was purchased. One more thing, the Biang commanders of Ziyuan and Jingyuan were Deng Shicheng and Lizugi. As for Yliu Bukhan, who had been with the ship, did not serve as commander, it was because Li Zhangtang still wanted him to serve as the calm second officer, the ship's pipe belt. This also proves that in Li Zhangtang's eyes, the ironclad ship is its core strength, although the second ship Zijing is much more expensive. After Carlo got the satisfactory result, he did not immediately let go of the Lord Admiralty in front of him, but continued to ask the next question. I heard that the Navy has prepared to build 2 new patrol ships, based on the performance of the Venice class in the Far East naval battle. Yes, Your Majesty, the Navy is preparing to build 2 new patrol ships. Faced with Carlo's question, Admiral Garlick answered unabashedly. These 2 patrol ships are new designs with certain modifications on the Venetian class. There is no difference in length, mainly due to complaints that there were too few secondary main guns in naval battles. The new patrol plan is to equip 10 152mm guns, secondary main guns, and these main guns also adopt the same central axis layout as the 254mm main gun, and also adopt a 2-tank design. 6 of them were installed in 2-unit mode, and were placed behind the bridge, and between the 3 chimneys. The other 4 were raised in 2-unit configuration, and placed behind the 254mm main gun. This looks very much like a multi-turreted religious relic. In addition, the armor has also been optimized and slightly strengthened, from 80mm 152mm to 90mm 152mm, making the Venice class better able to cope with various situations. Of course, after this improvement, its displacement has also increased a lot. Its standard tonnage has increased from 6850 tons to 7580 tons, and its full load displacement has also increased from 7460 tons to 8120 tons. In order to allow the new Venice class to continue to maintain high speed, the power has also been optimized. Its maximum horsepower has been increased from 13,000 to 15,000, and the maximum speed has also been slightly increased from 18.6 knots to 18.7 knots. It can be said that this is the most combat effective patrol vehicle in the world. Of course, it is unknown how long this can last, because the British Admiralty has ordered all shipyards to come up with a plan for 10,000-ton patrol ships before February 1885, and it is said that this time the British Admiralty plans to build 5 ships at a time. It can be said that he is rich and powerful. At least for now, Venice still maintains its advantage in the world. Of course, excellent warships have a cost that matches them, and all the money the Navy Ministry received from the Qing dynasty was invested in the installation and patrol of these 2 ships. To be honest, the cruise ship is now the most expensive warship of the same tonnage. It is almost 1.5 times the cost of an ironclad ship of the same level. If nothing else, the power cost is quite high. But for Admiral Gorek, now he can't wait to invest every lira in shipbuilding, because he has urgency. According to the information we have received, the French Navy is already designing blueprints for armored cruisers. We heard that the French are going to build 6 armored cruisers. Yes, this is why Admiral Gorek is worried. France wants to build 6 cruise ships. Is this true or false? Carlo asked why he didn't get the news. Facing Carlo's confused expression, Admiral Gorek continued, "This is the information we learned from insiders in the French Navy. The French plan to conceal this news first. Do you still need to hide this kind of thing?" Carlo felt that this news was very unreliable, because the new French Navy minister, Admiral Hyacinth Orbe, had been advocating the role of torpedoes since he came to power, and even claimed to build 1,000 torpedo boats. And in order to allow torpedo boats to overcome the shortcomings of being unable to sail far, he also ordered the Navy to develop a strange thing like a torpedo boat mothership. It doesn't seem like the head of the French Navy, who is obsessed with the role of torpedoes, would spend so much money on patrol equipment. But since Admiral Gorek said so, Carlo should regard the news as true. So he spoke, "I will ask people to pay attention to the movements of the French Admiralty. If there is anything unusual, I will notify you in time. I'm late in writing, so I can only update 1 chapter today. Mantou apologizes here, and also thanks the book friends who voted. Yesterday, Mantou asked for votes, and got 600 votes. I was really touched. It seems that book friends like Mantau's Italian book very much. Satisfied. Thank you all. Chapter 93 The Impatient Carlo. Negotiating with the Lord of the Navy was not all Carlo's work today, because he had other work to do. This time in Italy's Far East, it was not just the Navy's two-piece patrol that played a role, but the army also performed well. Although it mainly provided weapons and equipment, the guards can also be regarded as an army unit, so of course the army also deserves credit. However, in this Sino-French war, the army did not send any combatants, so the credit was not great. Although the guards were also part of the army, given their particularity, they could not be fully included in the army. Of course, this cannot be said to say that the army is not interested in the Sino-French war, but not many are interested. However, there is one weapon that has completely attracted the attention of the army, and that is the Maxim machine gun. This machine gun that shined at Zenangoan is very popular with the Italian army. This was not the case for General Saragut, the Minister of War, so he found Carlo for this purpose. Good day, Your Majesty. Hello, Your Excellency. General, do you have anything to do with your visit this time? Facing Carlo's inquiry, Admiral Saragut looked embarrassed, but finally made up his mind. Your Majesty, the main reason for coming here this time is to understand that Beretta Arms Company is an industry of the royal family. Facing the question from the Minister of War, Carlo smiled and looked at the general in front of him. Not really. As far as I know, the company is still run by the Pietro family. The royal family only has a stake in it, which does not affect its ability to make decisions. Oh. After listening to Carlo's explanation, Admiral Saragut showed a look of disappointment on his face, which was then hidden by him. Although the admiral concealed it very well, who Carlo was immediately obvious to him. What's wrong, General? Has Beretta Company done anything bad to the army? Facing Carlo's inquiry, Admiral Saragut thought about it and felt that it was not something shameful, so he spoke out his purpose. It turned out that the army liked the Maxim machine guns that had made a big splash at Zenangoan, so they wanted to buy a batch of them. However, after sending an inquiry to Beretta Company, I was shocked by its quotation. Its quotation was as high as 70,000 lire per gun, which made the army think that Beretta Company had issued an extra zero. You must know that it is a 57mm infantry gun. The price is about the same. This price was beyond the expectations of the Ministry of War. You must know that according to their understanding, the Maxim machine gun is a big consumer of bullets. It is enough ammunition for a company to fight a battle, but not enough for it to shoot for 10 minutes. Although Beretta's quotation surprised the army department, this weapon is so suitable for the current needs of the army, so the army can only bite the bullet and prepare to spend money to purchase a batch. According to unknown information, Admiral Saragut learned that the royal family had shares in Beretta Company. So with a try attitude, the admiral saw if he could let the royal family influence the company to lower the price point, but the words from Carlo's mouth made him know that it was all in vain. This is not to blame for Beretta having set the price so high, because the production of Maxim machine guns is currently very difficult due to basic materials. In addition, in order to develop this machine gun, Beretta Arms Company has invested a lot of money, coupled with a reward that should be given to Mr. Maxim. All factors have piled up. How can the cost of the Maxim machine gun not be high? By the way, how many Maxim machine guns does the army plan to purchase? After listening to the admiral's story, Carlo couldn't help but ask. Originally, the army planned to purchase 154 border defense. However, due to its price, the army could only purchase 80. This is a big deal. Carlo also had to praise General Saragut's words as far-sighted. This is a purchase of nearly 10 million lire. No wonder the Minister of War came to ask him. Don't think that the more funds the army has, the more funds it will spend on purchasing weapons. Compared with the Navy, the army does not spend much money on procurement. The current funding for the Italian army is 221 million lire, and the Navy is 117 million lire. Although the army's funding seems to be substantial, after deducting the salary allowances and training expenses of officers and soldiers, which account for the majority, less than half is left. After deducting support for the research and development of new weapons and construction costs in various places, the funds that can be used for weapons procurement are only 50 million. Just purchasing 80 Maxims and their ammunition will cost nearly 10 million lira. This will naturally make General Saragut, who is the Minister of War, embarrassed. But it's a pity that it loses face, and it still can't happen, which is a bit embarrassing point, since the desired results were not obtained in Carlo. General Saragut left after chatting about the army for a while. After Carlo sent the Minister of War away, he rubbed his slightly swollen temples and began to close his eyes to rest. During this time, he clearly felt that the attitudes of the ministers towards him were different. Although he did not say anything, his intervention in the Sino-French War made them look at him with a hint of fear. This is a good start. I believe that, as long as I don't make serious mistakes, the Prime Minister will know how to choose when he becomes an adult. Just as Carlo closed his eyes and thought, he suddenly smelled a hint of fragrance and then felt a soft touch on the back of his head. A pair of slender hands covered his eyes, and a familiar voice sounded, "Guess who I am." There is no need to guess. Who else could it be besides Naya, who is growing brighter and more attractive? But judging from the size of the softness behind the head, it should be much larger. "Naya, your question is really not difficult at all," Carlo said, holding him in his lap with his backhand. "Ah, your majesty, you are really becoming less and less humorous. Stop touching it all the time. I'm just trying out my results. It seems I still need to work hard." Well, some distance has been broken between Carlo and the little maid. On a dark and windy night for a month, when he couldn't even see the mythical beast, Carlo transformed into a hungry wolf and swallowed Naya, a little white rabbit, skin and bones. After eating this tender cabbage, Carlo felt refreshed. The little maid became more and more unique. The mixture of the innocence of a girl and the charm of a young woman made Carlo fascinated by it, and he almost couldn't pull it out. Fortunately, Carlo was busy with work during this period, which allowed him to gradually leave the land of gentleness. But now that Wen Raoxiang has come over, Carlo can no longer control himself. Fortunately, he knew that this was an office, and attendants might knock on the door at any time, but he couldn't work in this state. Carlo took the little maid and walked towards his dormitory. His footsteps were so eager that anyone just wanted something to happen. I'm thinking about when to write a side story, but I definitely can't do it now. Okay, I don't have enough time today, so I can't do 2 updates. Tomorrow, Steam Buns will guarantee 2 updates. Please support me with some recommendation votes in advance. Maybe there will be surprises. Chapter 94. The Prime Minister's Thoughts. For Cheyenne RUOW, a loving boss, a million rewards will be a. After a night of lingering love to the bone, Carlo got up refreshed the next day. He looked back at the sleeping maid, feeling a little proud in his heart. "Telling you that you dare to tease me, you must suffer a lot now." Just as Carlo prepares for a new day, the Prime Minister's office begins a new day at work. However, the atmosphere among the staff in the Prime Minister's office has not been right recently. Although their attitude towards work has not changed, there is a hint of something else in their eyes regarding the changes in the Prime Minister's office. As the Prime Minister's secretary, was anxious in his eyes, but he had no good solution. After all, the Prime Minister had a very clear attitude on whether Italy would intervene in the war between China and France. Although it cannot be said that France has lost, it is obvious that everyone knows what is going on. Not to mention that Italy has really opened up the Far East market, as His Majesty said. Although its order is only 100 million lire, it is a good thing to open a gap. You must know that before, Italy's annual exports to the Far East basically fluctuated around 30 million lire. If the money spent on purchasing arms and warships is included, Italy's exports to the Far East would have increased 5 or 6 times today. Therefore, in this war, publicly, he should cheer for Italy to open the Far East market. Privately, of course, he does not want to see the Prime Minister lose his power. Of course, this is just a little bit of his personal thoughts. As for what the Prime Minister thinks, he has no control over it, but maybe the Prime Minister and his confidants in the office can figure it out. Prime Minister, we are very passive at the moment. The war in the Far East made the king win the bet. Now many people have changed their feelings towards the king. if we don't do something, I'm afraid. Interior. Minister Sabo was in his office, persuading Prime Minister Despotis with earnest words. His expression was so sincere and his words were so fierce that uninformed people thought he was the Prime Minister. But what can we do? Another confidant on the side, Kranz Rivera, who is the Secretary of Commerce and Trade, held a different view. At least something needs to be done to save it, otherwise we will just watch it. Facing Rivera's words, Sabo immediately retorted, "Don't think I don't know. You might still be secretly happy. At least your work has been shared a lot by His Majesty this year." "Why do you say that?" Faced with Sabo's biting attitude, Rivera also became furious. "Then what should I say? I'm too lazy to tell you. I guess you don't dare to say it." You faced with the constant bickering between his two confidants, the Prime Minister, who was somewhat upset himself, couldn't help but slam the table. Snapped, "Do you want to have enough noise here?" Facing the angry Prime Minister, the two of them were like fighting cocks just now, but they immediately withered. "I don't care what you think now, but you must all calm down." Faced with the Prime Minister's display of power, the two could only bow their heads looking at the two people in front of him. The Prime Minister couldn't help but continue to get angry. Sabo, as the Minister of the Interior, although the demonstrations have passed, but look at the public security situation this year. Why are the vicious cases 12% higher than last year? If you cannot suppress this wave, the internal affairs, it's time for a replacement. After talking about the Minister of the Interior, Prime Minister Despotis turned his gun on the Minister of Commerce and Trade. "Rivera, our country's trade with France dropped too much last year, reaching 21%. This requires your department to find a solution." After spraying each of the two ministers, the Prime Minister became more angry. "You should each go about your own business and stop worrying about my problems." The two people who were granted amnesty immediately left the office in despair. After closing the door, Despotis rubbed his forehead. Although he drove away his two confidants, how could he not pay attention to what they said? It all comes down to his own carelessness. Originally, the war between the French and the Qing dynasty should have been overwhelming. Although he had the attitude of watching a show and let the young king toss, he had other control measures very well. It will not let Italy go deep into this war, but make Italy's presence felt. I didn't expect that the French would be so incompetent. Although the French Navy failed to achieve its goal in the naval battle due to the two Venetian-class battleships, the French's famous army would actually be defeated by the king. And he also learned about France's most important defeat, the Battle of Zenangun. Although there were Italian equipment in that battle, it was the King army that participated in the battle. You must know that more than 10 years ago, equal forces from Britain and France attacked the King capital and forced it to sign a citywide treaty. It has only been a few years since the French found it difficult to even establish a border. Perhaps after the Franco-Prussian War, France had been demoralized by the unified Germany and no longer had the pride and courage that it inherited from the Louis XIV and Napoleonic eras. Of course, this defeat caused him to suffer heavy losses. The Lord Carlo, who had been gradually suppressed, suddenly rose up and became his restraint. However, considering the monarch's seniority, his restrictions will become greater and greater. After all, His Majesty Carlo is already 18 years old, and his coming of age ceremony will be held in 2 years, and his power will be greatly increased by then. This is why many ministers have now changed their attitudes towards this monarch. Although the Sino-French War brought Italy huge profits, his gradual growth is also a major inducement. Of course, the two complement each other and are indispensable. However, others can change their attitude toward His Majesty, but Despotis, as Prime Minister, cannot. Because this is about power, other people, whether led by the king or the Prime Minister, can have their share of power, and if he turns to the king, can he gain more power than he currently has? I'm afraid he has to hand over a lot of power. This is the difference between the Prime Minister and other ministers. Not to mention that he has been in power for the past 3 years and no one can restrain him. It is so difficult to let go point. But Depretis doesn't have a clue about what to do next. But there are still 2 years left, and he still has 2 years to think about it point. If he can't bear the loss of power, the worst he can do is leave his position as prime minister. Even so, I don't know why he is always a little unwilling. What you should do next is up to you point. Looking at the crowds of people coming and going outside the window, Depretis fell into deep thought point. Sudan, I have added an update. Please thank Mr. Sudan for the reward and update. Chapter 95 Practical Alternating Current. Carlo is completely unaware of the Prime Minister's thoughts, but he has been very busy recently. He discusses national affairs during the day and personal matters at night, which is not very comfortable point. The only bad thing is that my legs feel a little weak after a long time. But Carlo enjoys it. Youth is his capital, and he can come back after a few days of rest point. In this way, the time came to 1885. First of all, the Sino-French War completely came to an end. Both governments signed and ratified the peace treaty. The smoke in the sky over the Far East had completely dissipated point. The conference on Africa in Berlin also ended. In this conference, Italy only gained the Greater Somalia region of East Africa as its own sphere of influence. This does not have a big impact on Italy, because Italy currently does not have the strength to carry out the next colonial development immediately. After all, Italy suffered heavy losses in Tunisia, so everyone must take a break point. But even so, Carlo still received the good news. What? A practical axe system was successfully developed. Facing Carlo's surprised look, the captain of the guard, Felicius Mickey, who was responsible for conveying the news, was a little surprised but nodded, although he didn't know what the research and development of alternating current was worth so much to the king. Prepare the car. We'll go to Merino right away. Carlo had no time to explain to his captain of the bodyguard how important the practical use of alternating current was to Italy, because his mind had already flown to Merino, and he was a little impatient to see practical alternating current point. When Carlo arrived at the Merino Electrical Experiment Center, he immediately saw Tesla and Argus waiting for him at the gate. It seemed that they had already figured out the temperament of his king, and knew that at this time, it will definitely appear. Carlo, we made it. Tesla, who looked excited, was rarely arrogant. Yes, we have changed times. Unexpectedly, Carlo was more showy than him. Well, the two flamboyant young people even hugged each other after they approached. Take me to see it quickly. Now I can't wait to see the practical alternating current. Seeing Carlo's impatient expression made Tesla very satisfied. Your Majesty, please come to me. The group of people arrived at the laboratory and saw Tesla pointing at a circle of connected instruments. Your Majesty, this is a practical alternating current system I developed. Can you introduce it to me? Looking at the various objects in front of him, Carlo planned to listen to Tesla's introduction. With pleasure, Your Majesty. Anyone who does electric power research knows the difference between alternating current and direct current. Direct current is stable, but the transmission distance will cause huge waste, so the transmission distance is very limited. Carlo certainly knew this, otherwise how could Edison, who was so prosperous in the United States, build a power station every 1 kilometer? Since the construction cost of DC is too high, why don't we use AC? It is helpless to say that, although AC has long transmission distance and low loss, its fluctuating current changes in size and direction, making the current the motor cannot be used at all. In fact, when the current changes direction, the magnetic field subsequently changes strength and direction, so the motor inevitably stops spinning. Faced with this thorny problem, Tesla came up with a new approach. Your Majesty, please see, this is the AC motor I designed. He pointed to a motor that looked similar to a DC motor and said, I added electromagnet windings that generate a stable magnetic field to this motor, which allows the motor to have magnetic field with constant strength. This allows alternating current to be used normally in the motor. It is obvious that Tesla also knows where the current major consumers of electricity are. although it is currently used in lighting to let the public feel the use of electricity. The major consumers of electricity have always been factories. Obviously Tesla also knows that only by taking over the factory can the ACC system be used on a large scale. Point of course, except for this ACC motor, his place is similar to the ACC equipment of later generations, but because it is a laboratory, there is still a lack of equipment to increase and decrease the voltage. Point of course, transformers already existed, and the Frenchman Lucien Goulard and the Englishman John Jobs demonstrated this device to the public at an exhibition in London 2 years ago. Point of course, Tesla has not only developed ACC motors in the past 3 years. Because of the fluctuating characteristics of ACC, Tesla has specially developed many gadgets. To overcome its characteristics, Tesla only briefly introduced these gadgets, but Carlo could still see his complacency. Point. After listening to his introduction, Carlo looked at the master of electricity research in front of him. Nicholas, what are your thoughts on high power ACC motors? When it comes to his own profession, Tesla speaks directly. This is not complicated. In fact, the design of high power ACC motors is not complicated. I think there are not many problems in this regard. What about large, high power, high frequency ACC motors? Carlo's question made Tesla stop. This question was not that easy to answer. Carlo looked at Tesla in front of him and was not anxious at all. This man was famous for developing motors in this area, so it shouldn't be a problem for him. Point. Don't blame Carlo for wanting to squeeze Tesla again so quickly. Although he can wait, Italian industry cannot afford to wait. The current speed of Italian industrial development does not satisfy him. If he wants to achieve leapfrog development, he can only embrace electrification. Point. The prerequisite for electrification requires the use of a large amount of cheap electricity. At this point, large, high power and high frequency ACC motors are the top priority, because this can significantly reduce electricity bills and allow more factories to use motors. Carlo had his own considerations on this point, and he immediately spoke to Tesla. I hope that the research will be mainly divided into 2 categories. One is ordinary industrial motors, and the other is practical high power and efficient generators. This won't be a big problem, but what else do you want from the generator? Of course, the higher the better, but I also know that this is impossible. So let's use a generator with 5000 horsepower and 2.2 kV power as a standard. Of course, Carlo would not ask the horse to run and not feed the horse at the same time, so he continued. I will invest 20 million lire in building a company specializing in the production of this type of motor. I have already thought of a name. It will be called Westinghouse Electric Company. Everyone can see your contribution, Tesla, so you will own 10% of the company's earnings. Faced with Carlo's generosity, how could Tesla refuse? But he felt a little embarrassed to agree like this. While Tesla was hesitating, Carlo immediately made the decision for him. That's how we decided. Who makes us friends? I can't let my friends suffer. He won't let this person live the rest of his life in poverty, like in his previous life, but he will never let him spend the rest of his life as he pleases. You have to know that this person is unparalleled in his waves, wireless power transmission and other sinkholes. Otherwise, let alone Italy, even the British government would not be enough to see it. After Carlo chatted with Tesla for a while, he even invited him to have lunch. Of course, he did not exclude other people in the laboratory and gave them enough rewards under the grateful eyes of the Marino Experimental Center staff. Carlo left with satisfaction. Asking for recommendation votes. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96. Telegram from Argentina. Buenos Aires, located on the south bank of the Rio de la Plata, is a pearl of South America. The excellent natural pasture in the Pampas grassland makes the area an excellent livestock production area in the world. Argentina's cattle products have always been a strong commodity on the market, which has also made Buenos Aires, located in it, the core city of the region. Therefore, after Argentina became independent, Buenos Aires unsurprisingly became its capital. The Argentine people have been doing very well in recent years. The well-developed livestock industry and pleasant climate have attracted a large number of immigrants. Argentina's development can be said to be booming. But even so, Argentina still has its own troubles. That was the territorial dispute with Chile in Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego, both countries gaining independence from Spain in 1810. In the early days, the borders between the two countries followed Spanish divisions. Even the Treaty of Peace, Friendship, Trade, and Commerce signed by the two countries in 1855 only generally recognized their independent borders from Spain. Subsequently, the two countries re-signed a boundary treaty 3 years ago, delimiting the boundary at the eastern entrance of the strait. For unknown reasons, the boundaries of the Beagle Channel and the ownership of the three islands, Picton Island, Lennox Island, and Nuva Island, have not been determined. These three islands located in the western section of the strait have rich fishery resources. Since their ownership has not been determined, fishermen from both countries come here to fish. Since they all come to fish, there will be disputes, and as the disputes intensify, the two countries will naturally be involved. With the intervention of the two governments, the relationship between the two countries completely deteriorated, and because the area is located near the Strait of Magellan and the climate change is extremely severe. The only one that can play a role here is the Navy. Therefore, the two countries need their navy to speak more for disputed territories. However, in terms of navy, the gap between Argentina and Chile is not small. Chile, which just won the Guano War, has a navy that is much higher than Argentina in terms of size, performance of warships, and the level of its officers and soldiers. This allowed the Argentine navy to be suppressed by it in several confrontations and conflicts. This situation is very detrimental to Argentina's desire to occupy the three islands. So naturally, the Navy's calls for the purchase of new ships are getting louder and louder. Faced with the call of the Navy, Julio Roca, as the president of Argentina, certainly cannot ignore it. This will not give him the upper hand in discussing with Navy Minister General Juan Goyeneche which warships to purchase suitable for confrontation with the Chilean Navy. First of all, we need to suppress the opponent in terms of speed. Secondly, we need to have sufficient firepower to make the Chileans learn to calm down. And secondly, we need to withstand the opponent's firepower in terms of armor. General Goyen opened his mouth by stating the Navy's requirements. Although President Roca has never been in the Navy, he is also a soldier. When he heard so many requests from the Navy Minister, he felt that the cost this time was not small. Juan, the budget given by the Ministry of Finance is limited. You must pay attention to overspending, otherwise Thomas from the Ministry of Finance will not be easy to talk to. Please rest assured, Mr. President, our Navy will control the budget. Faced with General Goyen's assurance, President Roca did not believe it at all. He was very familiar with this person's temperament. Whenever he got an opportunity, he would desperately try to get funding from the Navy. Although this is basically the case for the navies and armies of all countries in the world, compared with others, General Goyen is inferior. For a small fee, he would act like a dead dog and disgust others to death, especially Thomas from the Ministry of Finance. If it weren't for his deep support in the Navy, President Roca would have wanted to kick this shameless general out of his own government department. So, do you have any suitable options? His Excellency the President was too lazy to talk nonsense and directly asked about the Navy's plans. Yes, of course there is. Our Navy Department has carefully selected 3 warships as options. As he spoke, General Goyen took out 3 drawings for the President to choose from. He also explained it carefully. This first picture is from the United Kingdom. There is currently no physical object. It has just started construction, so we can only look at the drawings. This is a British armored cruiser named Black Class. As far as we know, the maximum speed of the ship's design is 20 knots. Equipped with 10 6-inch naval guns, 2 9.2-inch first-level main guns, and a displacement of 8,100 tons, which is very suitable for the needs of our Navy. What about price? It is clear that His Excellency the President is more concerned with another issue. We made an inquiry to the UK and found out that the price of the ship is £560,000, mainly because the cost of power is a little higher. When asked by the President, General Goyen truthfully gave the price. In fact, the United Kingdom is still building a 10,000-ton cruise ship, but that thing is more expensive and is not something Argentina can consider. There is no way the Ministry of Finance can agree to this price. You also know how much the Ministry of Finance will allocate. As the Minister of the Navy, General Goyon certainly knows how much the Ministry of Finance has allocated this time, which is only £410,000. This price cannot buy the warship he likes, but it depends on people, and they always need to fight for it. It is not his way to give up like this style. Then he took out a card and said, "This is a newly developed cruise ship in France. It is equipped with 4 190mm main guns and 8 160mm secondary main guns." General Goyon introduced that the tonnage of this French patrol is also 7,000 tons. However, compared with the British patrol just now, the French patrol is much inferior in firepower. The only advantage is that its speed is faster than that of the British patrol. Fast, reaching a speed of 21 knots. Of course, letting it run at such a fast speed would be a bit awkward on the armor. Of course, this is all nitpicking. For Argentina, both models are suitable, but the price exceeds the budget. The French model is priced at £526,000. The price of these two ships was not acceptable at first glance, so Mr. President looked at the Minister of the Navy and asked, "Do you have any more?" "There is another one." As he spoke, General Goyon took out a drawing and continued, "This is an improved version of the Venice-class armored cruiser from Italy. This battleship was developed by the Italian Navy after making certain improvements after the war in the China Sea. This battleship, from General Goyon, President Roca learned that this Italian patrol equipment was equipped with 4 10-inch twin main guns, 10 twin 5-inch secondary main guns, and other secondary guns. It can be said that except for being weaker than the two British and French warships in terms of speed, this battleship is far more powerful than them in other aspects. Even he, who doesn't understand the Navy, can feel this. So, how much does this battleship cost? £550,000. Is the price right? Hearing General Goyon's offer made President Roca hesitate. "Your Excellency, these 3 armored cruisers are currently the best in the world, and they are also warships that meet our urgent needs." Thinking of the current territorial dispute with Chile, President Roca gritted his teeth and said, "Are you sure that, if you buy this ship, you can suppress the Chileans?" "I can guarantee that, President." Roca was relieved after hearing General Goyon's assurances from the Navy. Although the Secretary of the Navy is a screw-up in other respects, his work ethics and abilities are recognized. Since the disadvantage can be moved back, then the boat is worth buying. So, which one do you think is more suitable for Argentina? Italy's Venetian improved model. Although the price is similar, everyone can see the difference in firepower and armor. Then, send a telegram to Italy to inquire about our order for warships. Well, in fact, General Goyon had only one choice in his eyes from the beginning, and that was the Venice improved class. This warship has just withstood the test of the war, and it is much better than other cruise ships that are still based on drawings. However, its high price made General Goyon very worried about getting approval from the president. And here he played a trick. When asking about the construction and installation inspections of Britain and France, he specifically proposed to purchase various spare parts. The reason was that Argentina was too far away from the two countries, and preparing various parts in advance could save time. The ship quotations sent by Britain and France included the prices of these spare parts, which naturally greatly increased the quotations of the warships of the two countries. Then they competed with Venice, which had better firepower and armor. The two warships that had no price advantage were even beaten. General Goyon, who got the result he wanted, was immediately happy to send a telegram to Italy. To chapters, so tiring. I'll take a break someday. Please give more recommendation votes. Chapter 97, Treaty of Friendly Exchange between the Italian and Arab naval forces. The telegram from Argentina made everyone in the Admiralty cheer. While the Venetian improved class was still under construction, some countries came to buy it. This was an affirmation of Italy's shipbuilding capabilities. Faced with such a good thing, how could the Navy disagree with Argentina's ship purchase? Besides, Argentina is currently also the main destination for Italian immigrants. Its excellent domestic conditions are very popular among immigrants, so there are not a few Italians in Argentina. Therefore, selling warships to Argentina is of great benefit to Italy, and the Navy naturally feels that it can be done. However, such a major matter as the sale of warships cannot be entirely decided by the Navy. It also needs to be decided by His Majesty Carlo as the leader of Italy. Your Excellency, Admiral, I completely agree with Argentina's purchase of ships, but the other party's request to lower the selling price requires you to negotiate with the shipyard. After flipping through the documents in his hand, Carlo told the Minister of the Navy his decision. Yes, the Argentine Navy also wants the Italian side to slightly lower the price of the Venice improved cruiser, because they only have £530,000 on hand. This is all due to the white shirts in the Ministry of Finance. They knew that the Navy wanted to purchase ships, but they could only provide £500,000. For this reason, Finance Minister Thomas directly informed the President that this was the largest financial resource the Ministry of Finance could provide. If he wanted to, if we want more, we can only start with personnel funds. Faced with the categorical words of the Finance Minister, President Giulio Rocca certainly did not dare to misappropriate personnel funds, which is much more important than the Navy. For this reason, he directly informed the Minister of the Navy, General Goulon, that the government could only spend so much money. Either the Navy Department would find a way within itself, or it would consider buying another ship. How is it possible for the Navy to change its target? Faced with the problem of insufficient funds, General Goulon could only find ways to raise £30,000 from within the Admiralty. The remaining £20,000 could not be found, so the Argentinians could only ask Italy if they could lower the price. Faced with such a question, Carlo was unwilling to give a direct answer. He kicked the ball to the Admiralty and asked it to negotiate with the shipyard. However, according to his estimation, the money can be negotiated because selling a warship involves not only selling the warship itself, but also other factors. On the contrary, the price is not so important. Otherwise the Germans would not. Quoting such a low cost for the second calming ship would cost money. As the head of the Navy, how could Admiral Gorek see Argentina's orders being lost like this? Besides, the external quotations are very profitable. However, given that there is a small gap in the funds on hand in Argentina, it is not necessary to lower the price slightly. Not a big deal. So, after returning to the Admiralty from the palace, Admiral Gorek immediately sent a telegram to the Andesha shipyard, asking them to reduce the selling price by £10,000. As for the other £10,000, just deduct it from the Admiralty's commission. You see how simple this is. It immediately meets the Argentinians' requirements. When Italy lowered the price, the arms purchase was almost announced. Subsequently, the Argentine government signed a contract with Italy to purchase a Venetian improved class. In order to leave a good impression on Argentina, one of the two Venice improved models under construction will be sold directly to the Argentine Navy. Faced with Italy's goodwill, how could Argentina, one of the top 3 in South America, not feel it? So 2 months later, a delegation led by the Argentine Navy Minister visited Italy, and their first stop was Genoa. In the Andesha shipyard, a group of officers in Navy uniforms were looking at the May 12th armored cruiser being built in the number 3 dock. There are obvious differences in the uniforms worn by this group of naval officers. Although everyone is sky blue in color, from the decoration and military caps, they are clearly naval officers from 2 countries. Yes, this group of officers does come from 2 countries. The leaders on both sides are the Argentine Navy Minister General Goulon and the Italian Navy Minister Admiral Garlock. It's really spectacular. This is the power of industry. Looking at the busy shipbuilders in the dock, General Goulon praised Italy's shipbuilding industry with envy. You're welcome, Minister. Our country's shipbuilding industry is nothing. If you go to Portsmouth or St. Nazaire, you will see the same spectacular sight. Admiral Gorek, who is the Lord of the Admiralty, answered politely, and the Portsmouth and St. Nazaire he mentioned were the centers of the British and French shipbuilding industries respectively. Your Majesty, you're welcome, General. We can't see this kind of scene in South America. Faced with the polite words of the Italian Navy Minister, how could General Goulon, who had worked in the Navy for many years, not understand that the prosperous shipbuilding industry is also part of the strength of the Navy? There is no way, and no way for Argentina, to have such a developed shipbuilding industry. Apart from anything else, Argentina's current population is only more than 2 million, and it does not have the strength to industrialize at all. The vast fertile soil of Argentina is very suitable for the development of agriculture and animal husbandry. The development of agriculture and animal husbandry alone has made Argentina very wealthy. No one wants to invest funds from agriculture and animal husbandry, which is a steady profit, to the unknown in industrial production. Even though Argentina has a lot of domestic minerals, it can still make money by exporting ores. Admiral Garlick was not clear about General Goyen's reflection, but he looked at the head of the Argentine Navy in front of him and expressed his thoughts. Actually, you don't have to envy our country. Both the Navy and the Army must serve the country's strategy. As for the situation around your country, its current strength is enough to deal with it. I personally suggest that your country now needs to consider more about naval officers and soldiers. General Gorek's words made General Goyen's heart move. So how do you think our country should train? First of all, your country needs to keep abreast of the latest developments in naval development. In addition, it also needs to communicate and conduct more exercises with other countries. Of course, you should also choose European countries in your choice. After all, Europe is the center for new tactics and new training methods. Regarding General Gorek's words, General Goyen certainly knew that he had his own little thoughts. But this is not wrong. South America is far away from Europe and indeed needs more naval exchange experience than European navies, and in terms of choices, Argentina doesn't have many choices. First of all, the British Navy is definitely experienced, but its relationship with Chile makes General Goyen hesitant to choose Britain. As for Germany, well, its army is awesome. The same goes for Russia and Austria-Hungary. Their armies are very powerful. Spain is not considered, for reasons we all know. The United States, which also belongs to the American continent, has no better naval experience than Argentina. After deducting these countries, Argentina can only choose France and Italy. However, considering the people in Argentina, Italy is the best choice. After all, there are many Italians in Argentina. In addition, in the recent naval battle on the China Sea, Italian officers and soldiers he also showed extremely high tactical accomplishment. So in the face of Admiral Gorek's suggestion, General Goyen readily accepted it. Your Excellency is right. Argentine naval officers and soldiers do need to learn from the experiences of other countries. And I think the performance of your navy is worth learning from our country. Okay, since Lang is interested in concubine, then the next thing is a matter of course. The heads of the two navies discussed in Genoa about strengthening exchanges between the two countries. In the end, the two countries decided that every 1 to 2 years, the two navies would conduct exchanges, which could be academic exchanges or technical exchanges. Of course, joint training and exercises are no longer a problem. Considering the funding and strength of the Argentine Navy, the main exchange location is also in its country. On the surface, Italy's free door-to-door communication improves the strength of the Argentine Navy. But there is no such thing as a free lunch in the world. Italian naval ships are heading to Argentina with the intention of expanding their influence in the region. As for General Goyen, who is the head of the Argentine Navy, doesn't he know this? In fact, he knows it, but it is good for Argentina, and that is enough. Besides, now in South America, the United States, Britain, France, Germany and other countries are involved. So what does one more Italy mean? So the newly released Italian-Arab Naval Treaty of Friendship and Exchange was released. I'm updating a chapter today. I have little inspiration after yesterday's outbreak, and I feel like I can't write anymore. Chapter 98 News about Lanfang. The South China Sea has returned to calm after the typhoon, and the sea is no longer rough. The fishermen in Pontianak also took advantage of the time when the typhoon left to prepare to go to the sea. After all, they had taken a break from the typhoon for several days. If they didn't go to the sea to fish quickly, if another typhoon came, it wouldn't be easy for the whole family to live in harmony with Fengbei wind. Song Ashing, like other fishermen, rowed his boat to prepare to unload the cages. The cages on the boat were piled up like mountains. This was the result of the hard work of him and his family over the past few days. Goddess Mazu bless me, I will definitely gain a big harvest this time. As long as I can raise enough money to treat Brother Song, I will definitely ask the 3 animals to fulfill my wish. Of course, the 3 animals Song Ashen talked about were naturally the small ones. He couldn't afford the big 3 animals like pigs, cows, and sheep. Only the gentleman in the city could afford them. Moreover, in addition to buying pig heads for Zaos and Sheng, you can catch fish yourself, and there are 2 chickens at home. However, Song Ashen looked sad when he thought of Dr. Liu's payment for the medicinal materials that he wanted to give to his son Brother Song. They were all expensive medicinal materials and cost several Dutch dollars. This was a bit difficult point, but when he thought of the Dutch devil's arrogance in Pontianak, Song Ashen couldn't help but spit. They were just beasts. Just as Song Ashen was thinking about what was on his mind, suddenly the people around him started to make a commotion. Look, there's a ship coming. It looks like a big warship. Could it be a Dutch warship? As soon as these words came out, all the fishing boats out to sea immediately turned around and rushed back. Over the years, Dutch warships have become accustomed to being arrogant and domineering, causing countless injustices. Who is not afraid of them? But they didn't know that what arrived this time was not a Dutch warship, but a king warship that got lost in the typhoon. Dang, why are these people so afraid of us? On the Ziyuan ship, Lifa, who served as the chief instructor of the Ziyuan ship, put down the telescope in his hand and expressed his doubts to Deng Shicheng beside him. Lifa spoke English, because Deng Shicheng also spoke English, so the communication between the 2 could only be completed in English. He remembered that the Ziyuan ship had been watched by tens of thousands of people everywhere it arrived. Even in Singapore, where the British were, the welcome they received was equally great. Unexpectedly, after encountering a typhoon and deviating from the course, there would still be such a situation. And judging from his clothes, he should be an overseas immigrant from the Qing dynasty. Maybe they mistook us for warships from other countries. Deng Shicheng, who also put down his telescope, looked at the flagpole and saw that the dragon flag on it was gone. Asshole, I said, how could this happen? And why didn't you quickly raise the flag again? Take care, sir. The wind has broken the rope. Then pick it up quickly. Under Deng Shicheng's scolding, the warship's dragon flag was finally hoisted. After the flag was hung, the commotion of the fishermen in the distance gradually subsided. As the Ziyuan ship raised the dragon flag, the situation was reversed. Look, it's the Imperial warship. The sharp-eyed fisherman immediately spotted the dragon flag on the Ziyuan ship and shouted, yes, could it be that the Imperial court has sent troops? The Imperial court finally remembered us. There was a lot of chatter on the fishing boats immediately, but a few fishing boats immediately speeded up and rowed towards the shore. They needed to inform others about the people coming from the court point. After approaching the offshore, the Ziyuan ship stopped. There is no port here. The Ziyuan ship has a deep draft and can only dock in the offshore. However, in order to find out where they were, Deng Shicheng and others boarded the traffic boat and prepared to ask fishermen here. Facing the officers and soldiers of the Ziyuan who came ashore, the surrounding fishermen gathered around submissively. Faced with this situation, Deng Shicheng frowned, thought about it, pointed to a fisherman and said, excuse me, where is this? It was Song Ashen who was being questioned by Deng Shicheng. Facing Deng Guande, who was wearing a flower feather on his head, Song Ashen was agitated for a while, but he still answered Deng Shicheng's questions. My lord, this is Pontianak. After hearing Song Ashen's words, Deng Shicheng said to Lifa beside him, it turns out that when we arrived in Pontianak, we really didn't expect to come here. Deng, I think we should meet with the local leader. In addition, we need to replenish some fruits and vegetables. Many of them are broken on the ship. Faced with Deng Shicheng's words, Lifa stated the current needs on warships. After the typhoon, many vegetables and fruits on the warship are no longer edible. Although they are not far from their next destination, Hong Kong, it is not a bad thing to be prepared. It was obvious that Deng Shicheng heard what Lifa said, and he spoke directly to Song Ashen. Can you introduce me to your clan leader or leader? Deng Shicheng didn't consider this a request. Song Ashen immediately patted his chest and promised, sir, please rest assured. If someone comes from the Heavenly Kingdom, the clan leader will beat gongs and drums to welcome him. It doesn't have to be so grand. I just want to buy some supplies. However, Song Ashan would definitely not hear what Deng Xicheng said, because he had already rushed to find the clan leader without keeping Deng Xicheng and others waiting. Song Ashan quickly came over with the clan leader. The old man Song Mingli has met the great master of his homeland. As soon as he saw Deng Xicheng, Patriarch Song was ready to kneel down and salute. Clan Chief Song is too polite. There is no need to perform this great ceremony. Deng Xicheng did not allow Patriarch Song to salute successfully and stepped forward to catch him. Patriarch Song was also a sensible person. When he saw that Deng Xicheng and others were unwilling to accept the gift, he lost his temper. I don't know if there is anything that needs the help of Angel of the Homeland. Our Songjia village will definitely help. Nothing. The main thing is that we want to purchase a batch of fruits and vegetables for use on the ship. Facing Deng Xicheng's words, a trace of disappointment flashed in Patriarch Song's eyes, but he quickly covered it up. That's no problem. It's a piece of cake. After speaking, he spoke to a young man behind him who was following him. Song-san, go back to the village and ask everyone to prepare a batch of fruits and vegetables to deliver to you. Tell you, they must be fresh. As his words fell, the young man named Song-san immediately ran back all the way. Although Patriarch Song had concealed it well just now, the worry in his eyes was seen by Deng Xicheng. Mr. Song, I don't know what to worry about. It's nothing. Since the warships of the motherland are here to purchase supplies, we don't dare bother you, sir. Patriarch Song's secretive attitude made Deng Xicheng curious. If my father-in-law is in any trouble, just say it's okay, and I won't spread the word. It's nothing. It's just that the Dutch were trying to occupy Pontianak, and Liu Tongzi led the big guys to fight the Dutch. At first we thought they were sent by the imperial court to support me and others. The Liu Tongzi mentioned by the Song clan chief was the son of the former ruler Liu Shaoshan. After Liu Shaoshan's death last year, the Dutch took advantage of the unstable situation in Lanfang and the outbreak of the Sino-French War, so they took the opportunity to try to bring it under their own jurisdiction. In order to survive, the Lanfang Republic reached an agreement with the Dutch and existed in a vassal-like mode. However, the Dutch have never given up their ambition to annex this fertile land that the Chinese have worked hard to develop. The words of Patriarch Song left Deng Xicheng speechless. Without the order of the imperial court, he could not have ordered to fire on the Netherlands, although the Ziyuan ship under his command was more powerful than any Dutch warship. However, it is not Deng Xicheng's style to do nothing when encountering such a thing. After some consideration, he said to an officer beside him, Ziquan, ask someone to collect the guns on the ship and transport them all over. Yes, although he does not have the right to fire, he still has the right to send some guns to express his attitude. Warships have always been equipped with guns. At that time, it was basically the case for warships to have hundreds of them. Sir, I'm afraid it will be difficult to communicate with the superior if you do this. Listen to me. Just say it's a typhoon loss. After finishing speaking, Deng Xicheng looked at Lifa. No problem. If it were me, I would do the same thing. Soldiers should be civilians. Since both of them agree, things will be easier to handle. So he took out nearly 100 guns from the Ziyuan ship and asked the Song Patriarch to hand them over to Liu Tongzi on his behalf. Although Lifa concealed it, he sent it as an anecdote when reporting to the country. So Carlo also knew about it. Determine the amount of updates based on recommendation votes. Chapter 99. Money moves people's hearts. I really didn't expect that this would happen. Carlo looked at the message sent back by Lifa and couldn't help but sigh. Yes, Carlo saw the message Lifa sent back about Lanfang. Some past life memories that had been forgotten now came to mind again. Although there were various praises for this Chinese Republic in the past life network, in Carlo's view, Fangland's annexation was inevitable. Without local support, overseas Chinese had no strength to resist the wolf-like European colonists. Although some people compare it to the founding of the United States, at its core, this country is more of a gathering of fellow countrymen who gather together to keep warm. Its interior is very narrow and exclusive. The leader can only be a person from Mizzhou, and the deputy leader is a person from Dabu. Plus some other factors mixed in, so it is impossible for Lanfang to develop and grow. Since it was unable to grow, Lan Fang seemed very isolated and helpless in front of the European colonists. Fortunately, Lan Fang was still a little clever. They claimed that they were a vassal of the Qing dynasty, which actually frightened people. However, now that the Qing dynasty itself is in decline, this fake vassal state cannot be its life-saving card. So no, the Dutch took advantage of the Sino-French War to attack Lan Fang on a large scale. This news is timely for Carlo and Italy. However, he still needs to figure out what the situation is on the ground, and the few words sent by Leifa cannot be the basis for him to make a decision. Thinking of this, Carlo summoned an attendant, immediately sent a telegram to Minister Jia Liwen in the Far East, asking him to immediately find out the relationship between Dutch Indonesia and Lan Fang, and mark this telegram as urgent. When Carlo's telegram was sent to Far East Minister Jia Liwen, the minister immediately felt that the telegram was unusual. The bright red urgent sign on it made him dare not neglect it, and immediately arranged for people to go as quickly as possible. Inquire about Lan Fang and the Dutch colonies. Of course, it takes time to explore information, but sometimes, some assistance can speed up the progress of information exploration, such as the ability to make money. So after Jia Liwen showed enough money making ability, the information he needed immediately appeared in front of him in a steady stream. Don't think that colonial officials now have such high ethics. There are countless people who succumb to Cheo's abilities, like crucian carp crossing a river. Jia Liwen immediately sorted out the information and sent it back to Rome. When Carlo got this information, he smiled. Now he needed to call a meeting to get Italy involved. The bright large conference hall of the palace has been rarely used, because unless a very important meeting is held, it will not be used easily. Of course, it has been closed since Carlo succeeded to the throne. But today, when the large conference hall is used again, the maids began to clean it early in the morning, while the attendants were responsible for placing some items needed for the meeting. By 9 o'clock, everything was ready and waiting for people to come to hold a meeting. The first person to come was the Minister of War, Admiral Surrogate, and then the Minister of Navy. Admiral Garlock also arrived. Unexpectedly, people from the military arrived so early. Then the cabinet ministers also arrived in twos and threes, and finally the Prime Minister. Desperatus arrives after everyone arrived. Carlo also appeared in the large conference room. With Carlo's arrival, the discussion in the conference room stopped abruptly. Carlo was very satisfied with the effect, which at least meant that he had initially gained authority among these people. After looking around the venue with his eyes, Carlo briefly explained the topics of the meeting. I feel a bit sorry for everyone to attend this meeting despite their busy schedules, but due to its importance, this meeting must be held. After briefly speaking his opening remarks, Carlo did not continue speaking, but instead spoke to Baron Felicius Mackey on the side. Chief Guard, let's begin. As the curtain on the wall was pulled open, a huge map of Kalimantan appeared in front of everyone. I saw Baron Felicius holding a baton and starting to explain the situation in Kalimantan. This map is a map of Kalimantan Island in Southeast Asia. Currently, the island is mainly composed of three forces. To the north is Sarawak and Brunei occupied by the British. To the west is the Lan Fang Republic established by Chinese immigrants, and to the south and east are a Dutch colony. The island is currently, no one present was impatient with the captain of the guard's narration. They all listened carefully to his narration, and some were taking notes from time to time. None of us are 3-year-olds. Since we started talking about the situation in Kalimantan, there must be a reason. Sure enough, when the captain of the guard said that Lan Fang and the Dutch were currently fighting, many people had already turned their heads after the captain of the guard finished speaking. Carlo's speech after taking the stage confirmed their thoughts even more. This battle between Lan Fang and the Dutch is an opportunity for our country. What kind of opportunity it is? Let Carlo tell you slowly. As we all know, the trade volume between our country and the Chinese is increasing, and our country's interests in the Far East are becoming more and more important, so it is necessary to have its own foothold in the Far East. In view of the current relations between our country and the Chinese and trade reasons, it is not necessary to it is convenient to obtain leased land in China, so it is inevitable to choose the neighboring countries, North Korea and Japan, for various reasons, so Southeast Asia is the best choice, and since Southeast Asia has long been occupied by other countries, I have experienced great difficulties in getting involved. The current war between Lanfang and the Dutch is a very good opportunity for our country. After Carlo finished speaking, applause broke out in the conference room. Although he did not necessarily agree with the king's remarks, Italy did need a colony in the Far East point of course. After the applause, the next step is the question and answer session. It is obvious that you want to get involved. If you don't have enough troops, you have no room to speak. Since you have to send troops, there will be expenses involved. All these things take time. So Foreign Minister Bacona spoke first. Your Majesty, may I ask, does your Majesty want to intervene and take down Lanfang alone? When asked by the Foreign Secretary, Carlo said without hesitation, yes, our country's strength is enough for the Dutch to withdraw from the competition rationally. What? If they don't retreat, then it will be an excuse for us to expand the scope and expel the Dutch from Southeast Asia. Carlo's words made many ministers' eyes light up. Even Britain and France coveted the interests of Dutch Indonesia. What a huge benefit it would be if Italy occupied it. Of course, Italy would not be able to take all of it, but it would also share part of the profit out. But its profits are still staggering. But your Majesty has considered whether Britain and France are standing behind the Dutch. Bacona's words made many people wake up. Although Dutch Indonesia has huge benefits, Britain and France behind it are also difficult to deal with. What does Italy need to prevent Britain and France from intervening? Don't worry about this. I'm prepared to use absolute strength to force the Dutch to bow. Of course, our goal this time is very clear. We only need Lanfang. At the same time, we promise the British that they will not have any influence on the Sarawak and Brunei they occupy. Ideas. Of course, the most important thing is that our country needs to have an absolute advantage in terms of theory and law, so that the Dutch have nothing to say. Carlo said this and glanced at everyone in the venue. For this point, I have arranged for Minister Jaliwan to go and prepare. It will definitely give the Dutch a surprise. Carlo's words made the Foreign Secretary stop asking. Although many details were still unclear, there were generally no problems. Although the Foreign Secretary had finished asking, there were still others who wanted to ask, and Finance Minister Torsten Tjera stood up. Your Majesty, you said that you will suppress the Dutch with absolute strength. I wonder how much strength you plan to send. Tjera, who succeeded Sabot as finance minister, although he does not have two amazing abilities, his nearly 20 years of experience in the Ministry of Finance is enough to make everyone in the Ministry of Finance unable to escape his eyes. So under his control next, the Ministry of Finance is much better than before. I can answer this question. Before Carlo could answer, the Minister of the Navy stood up, and Admiral Gorek spoke. Our Navy plans to use a fleet including the Dulio, Henrico and Arlo and Francisco. The fleet is expected to reach 27 ships with a total tonnage of 89,000 tons. In addition, our Navy will also carry 3,000 Army personnel officers and soldiers. Go together. Admiral Gorek's words caused a sensation in the conference room, because the warships he reported were all new ships of the Navy that have been in service in the past 10 years. It can be said that basically the best of the Italian Navy has been concentrated into this fleet. With such strength, let alone letting the Dutch withdraw from the battle for Lanfang, there is no problem at all in conquering Indonesia. The 3 battleships alone have a displacement of 38,000 tons. The finance minister was the one who was most anxious about the scale, reported by Admiral Garlock, because the cost of sailing half the world for a fleet of this size was definitely not low. So, let me ask you, has your military made a budget? Did it? How much is that? It's just a deterrent. The cost is 60 million lire. If you fight the Dutch, it's 250 million lire. Upon hearing the numbers reported by the military, the discussion in the conference room became even louder. Snapped Carlo, slammed the table, causing the scene to fall silent immediately. Don't think this cost is too much. Let me give you some data. In 1880, the Dutch collected various taxes from Lanfang of 14.2 million Dutch guilders. In 1981, it was 15.2 million Dutch guilders. In 1982 it was 16.7 million Dutch guilders. And in 1983 it was 16.7 million Dutch guilders, 17.4 million per year. Although Carlo did not say anything further, anyone could see the importance of Lanfang to the Dutch, and the Dutch were not satisfied with the tax, and were ready to take over Lanfang directly. So now there is an immediate change in the conference room, and cost is no longer an issue. Italy cannot let go of such a place that provides the Netherlands with a wealth of 30 to 40 million liras every year. The exchange rate between the Dutch guilder and the lira is around 1:2.2. Sure enough, money moved people's hearts. The ministers who wanted to continue asking just now stopped asking. Then everyone was high-spirited and prepared to get the annoying Dutch out of Lanfang. Everything at the meeting was seen by Prime Minister Desperatus. He did not speak at all in this meeting, but just sat here and observed Carlo's every move. The outcome of the meeting was not beyond his expectations. Italy couldn't wait for a colony, not to mention a rich and well-developed colony like Lanfang, which would be a fatal temptation for Bingley. After the meeting, Desperatus couldn't help but sigh when he returned to his carriage. His Majesty Carlo had already shown his political charm. What should he do? This chapter is for the Sultan. Please thank His Majesty the Sultan quickly. Chapter 100 Contact. Part 1. Desperatus's thoughts were told to no one but himself, and he concealed himself very well, giving no one a chance to observe. As the Italian government reached an agreement, it prepared at an unprecedented speed. The first thing is how to make the fleet sail to the South China Sea in a legitimate manner. Here we have to mention Li Zhangtang's help. The big boss in charge of Biang personally wrote to the court, announcing that Italy planned to send a fleet to train with Biang. Italy also took the opportunity to announce that it planned to send a fleet to train with the King fleet. Of course, it was not only the friendship with the Italians that allowed Li Zhangtang to come forward to provide cover. The 12 Italian fast cannons and 1,000 Italian fast guns made Li Zhangtang even more satisfied. After gaining the name, the Italian Navy and Army immediately accelerated their concentration. First, it took only 3 days for the Army's 3,000 men to prepare. He transferred 2,000 people from the Army's 2nd Division and another 1,000 people from the Guards, at Carlo's strong request, to form a temporary regiment-level establishment of 3,000 people. Compared with the Army, the Navy is much slower, but we can't blame them. Warships can't just leave. Necessary maintenance before departure is a must. In addition, some parts that may be damaged need to be replaced, and various logistics ships also need to be prepared for such a long voyage. And the choice of commander this time is also a big problem. This is not to say that the Navy cannot choose a leader, but that there are too many commanders to choose from. Moreover, such an action is so obvious that it is full of fame and fortune. Anyone who feels they are qualified will want to compete for it. Admiral Garlick felt that this was much more troublesome than other jobs, and it also gave him more headaches. Of course, no matter how much he had a headache, he still had to do other things. Countless supplies were gathered, such as cinchona to treat malaria and various drugs to treat tropical diseases. Of course, in addition to medicines, various other protective items are also indispensable. In a tropical environment, the most feared thing is various sadistic diseases. This is also the biggest threat to European colonists, which is much more powerful than the indigenous people. Thanks to the hard work of everyone in Italy, the preparation time this time was 1.5 months. In this competition to lead the team, Lieutenant General Oliver Hillian won over other competitors. So under the leadership of this Vice Admiral, the mighty Italian fleet began its journey to the Far East. Compared with the whole country working together and making various preparations, Whirlwind, the Italian minister to the Qing dynasty, was much more powerful and weak. However, his task was not light at all. He had just come out as the governor of Guangdong and Guangxi, and before he could take a breath, he heard the secretary's report. Minister, Mr. Howard sent a telegram from Shanghai. The goods you need are ready. However, due to the urgency of the request, the cost is a bit high. Liwen, who was sitting in the back seat, asked. How high? It cost 401,000 lire. It's okay. It's still within the acceptable range. The goods the two discussed were a batch of guns and ammunition, and they were guns and ammunition from other countries. This is also the equipment that Jia Liwen is preparing to transport to Langfang to support its resistance to the Dutch point. Of course, whether the Langfang people can get these weapons will need to be discussed first before knowing. And his visit to Governor Zhang this time was to find a middleman. Logically speaking, the fewer people who know about this kind of thing, the better. However, considering the issues of speed and success rate, it is best for the King government to take action. Minister, what was the outcome of the meeting? After reporting the news he had just received, the secretary became concerned about the outcome of the minister's visit. Faced with the secretary's question, Minister Jia Liwen answered with a smile on his face. The conversation with Governor Zhang was very good. He has promised to send people to Mizhou immediately to find king people who have connections with Lanfang. After hearing what the minister said, the secretary hesitated for a while and then continued. Can you please add another person who is responsible for contacting the Lanfang people? The secretary's words made Jia Liwen look up at him. What, you want to go? The secretary nodded vigorously. I want to contribute to the country, and I'm afraid that Major Kara, the military attaché, won't be able to deal with people from Lanfang. Facing the secretary's words, Jia Liwen just looked at him without saying anything. The secretary, who had been with the minister for several years, knew what the minister meant, so he had no choice but to say it truthfully. Okay, Your Excellency, Minister, I just want to get some credit. I have been with you for several years, and I still hold the position of second secretary. Not willing, yes, not this time. Major Kara is the suitable candidate for the first contact. You can go next time. Jia Liwen's words made the secretary put aside her petty thoughts and sit quietly in the carriage. As for Governor Zhang Nanpizang, who he had just visited, he was talking with his staff after Jia Liwen left. Mr. ZHU, why do you think this Italian minister suddenly became interested in the overseas Lanfang people? The person whom Zhang Zedong called the Bamboo King was his new staff member Zhao Fengchang. Zhao Fengchang, who was born in Changsha, had to go south to Guangzhou because of the collapse of the Taiping Rebellion. He once served as the staff of Yao Jiniuan, the Guangdong feudal lord. Later, Yao Jiniuan was dismissed and became the staff of Governor Zhang, who went south to Guangzhou. Because of his diligence, quick thinking, and skillful handling, he was quickly appreciated by Zhang Zedong and was appointed as the supervising copywriter, involved in secrets, and drafted telegrams and memorials. Faced with Governor Zhang's inquiry, Zhao Fengchang naturally made some assumptions. What Governor Zhang is thinking, I think Iran should want to follow a false path to destroy Guo. As expected of man with quick thinking, he immediately guessed the Italians' plans through the Italian fleet's intention of coming to the Italian minister to ask him to help. So, Mr. ZHU, do you think this governor should help with this? In both public and private matters, the governor of the constitution should help with this. In public affairs, it is beneficial to the court to make good friends with the people of the country. When observing the people of the country, they seem to attach great importance to the opinions of the court. From intervening in the war between the court and the legal person, although there are people with good intentions and the legal person has the intention of making enemies, but he is willing to work so hard. This can be seen that Yi Ren seems to be more hoping to make good friends with the court with his unique attitude. In private, Mr. Governor Zhang is a good person, and he will need Yi Ren's skills in the future. When the time comes, it will show. Zhao Fengchang explained all aspects of the friendship with Italy, which made Governor Zhang nod repeatedly. One word from Mr. ZHU is worth 10 years of studying. Then just do as Mr. ZHU said. I will send a message soon to ask Mies how to select people to send to Guangzhou as soon as possible. Following Governor Zhang's decision, the fast horse from the governor's office immediately delivered the official document to the prefect of Mizhou. Facing the governor's urgent order, the Mizhou prefect naturally did not dare to slack off and immediately asked people to search for people who had contact with Lanfang. After 3 days of searching, a man named Liu Jingsheng was immediately invited to the prefect's yamen. This is Liu Jingsheng, the cousin of Liu Engun, the ruler of Lanfang, and he is an excellent choice for the middleman. Liu Jingsheng was soon sent to Guangzhou. After a conversation with Italian Minister Whirlwind, Liu Jingsheng got on a transport ship and headed south to Langfang with the Italian military attaché Major Care. Recommendation votes. Please recommend votes. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.